Everybody, welcome to the WBC Council meeting of 21st of January 2021. I need to give you some comments first or requests for how to proceed. Please ensure that any mobile devices or mobile phones or similar media are switched off. If you are not speaking, sorry, I forgot to stick my camera on. Right, here I am. Yes, if you are not speaking or being asked to speak, please mute your microphones. If you do not mute your microphone, it will be muted for you. The reason for asking you to keep your microphones and cameras off when you're not speaking is they use valuable resources, and so the performance can sometimes get a bit sticky if there's a too high a demand. To assist people viewing the meeting, could everyone turn off their cameras and only turn them on when speaking, and also introduce themselves whenever they speak? To ensure the smooth running of the meeting, could members wishing to speak please use the hands up facility on Teams? There is a symbol near the top of the screen that looks like a hand open. If you click on that, it puts a little yellow hand on the screen alongside your name, and then we know that you will wish to speak. And you use that whenever possible. And please do not speak until asked to do so by myself. Please note also that the meeting is currently being webcast live. Thank you. That's the introductory notes. So we now move on to the beginning of the meeting. Agenda item 73 is apologies. Does anyone have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in terms of apologies, we have Pauline Jorgensen, Oliver Whittle, and Guy Grandinson, who may be late.
Okay, thank you for that. We now move on to agenda item 74, the minutes. Does anyone have any amendments to the minutes of the last meeting? And if you do, can you please use the hands up signal to draw my attention to it? I'll give a few moments for that to happen. I can't see any hands, so I will assume there are no amendments. Can I therefore have a members' agreement to the minutes on the basis that no one's objected? I will assume you're in agreement unless someone has advised and they haven't. So the amendments, if they had been put forward, will be annotated and added later, but there aren't any. So we move on to agenda item.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, Councillor Sarah Kerr.
Yes.
I just wish to say that I'm abstaining because I wasn't present. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Carr. We now move on to agenda item 75, which is declarations of interest. Does anyone wish to declare an interest? No? No hands up. So we move on then to Mayor's announcements, agenda item 76. Of course, because of the COVID-19, we are very limited in what we can do. Our meetings are, of course, virtual, and so there's little or nothing to report on Mayor's announcement at the moment, other than I have done a couple of virtual meetings to discuss things with people and to thank them for things and to sit in on AGMs. Other than that, nothing to announce. I now move on to agenda item 77, public question time. We have here 30 minutes for this item. Can I just remind you that firstly that you can get to the question as quickly as you can without too much preparation and build up. When you say your question, could you please read it out quickly? It should be brief and concise. And the executive members' responses to questions must be no longer than 2 minutes duration, and these will be timed. So at that point, I move on to my list here, which says that Anne Chadwick is to ask a question of Councillor Ulla-Corinne Clark. Would you please ask your question, Ms. Chadwick? Ms. Chadwick, are you there?
Mr. Mayor, could you ask Helen Palmer and Mike Smith to turn their cameras off, please?
Yes, okay. There are two people who've got their cameras on, and Helen Palmer, it says here as a guest, could you turn it off? And what was the other one, Council?
Mike Smith.
Me, Mike Smith, but I'm not aware of it. I've got a thing showing me that it's off.
Oh, okay, right. And Chadwick, have you arrived yet? No? Okay, in that case, the question will be responded to in writing. And we move on to the next one, which is Jackie Rance to ask your question of Councillor Orin Clark.
Yes, hello, Jackie Rance. Would the Executive Member for Children's Services give an update on Wokingham Borough Council's use of the Winter Fund to help local families in these difficult times? I'm aware, as I've been supporting parents in Shinfield South, and know what a difference it makes.
Yes, thank you for your question. As of the 8th of January this year, we have received 53 referrals for support from the COVID Winter Grant Fund via the Coronavirus Community Response One Front Door. And we have so far distributed £21,000 to families with or without children who are struggling with the cost of food and fuel. In addition, the families of all pupils in receipt of benefits-related free school meals have been provided with food vouchers to cover the Christmas holiday and will be provided with vouchers to cover the leave in February. We have also supported 75 care leavers to meet the cost of food and groceries. The grant is available until the 31st of March, and I would like to take this opportunity to encourage everyone or anyone who is struggling with the cost of fuel or food to apply for support through this grant.
Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary, Ms. Rance?
Yes, I do. Would the Executive Member for Children's Services also give an update on Wokingham Borough Council's use of, how much of the grant, remains available for families with or without children? Beg your pardon.
Yes, as of the 8th of January, I don't have a later figure, I'm afraid, £80,000 remains.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Right, we move on now to Philip Cunnington. Would Phil Cunnington like to ask his question of Charles Margetts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to ask the Executive Member for Health, Wellbeing and Adult Services a question, because I'm very aware of the effect on the mental health and wellbeing of friends and neighbours in Norris, where I live, and also across the borough, as a result of the restrictions that have been enforced during the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition, the effect on mental health due to traumatic experiences, those who've suffered illness, bereavement, loss of employment, or financial hardship as a direct result of the pandemic. Can you advise me, please, of any plans is made to deal with this?
Thank you, Phil. And yes, the COVID pandemic has had a real impact on people's mental health. Via our community response, we've been trying to reach out to those who are isolated and vulnerable. Adult social care within WBC has made 6,000 initial welfare checks with 16,000 follow-up welfare calls via the WBC, the Link Visiting Scheme. And there have also been 4,000 plus calls to the One Front Door service, which is supported by WBC. This One Front Door takes calls of any nature, many of which relate lately to mental health. These initiatives will continue to be in place over the next period. We also have further initiatives we're doing. Firstly, a project with Early Plus PCN and Citizens Advice to encourage residents to call the One Front Door if their mental health is suffering. The CAB will try to resolve some of the underlying issues that are causing depression and anxiety, such as financial stress and relationship breakdowns. They can also post to many other specialist services. In addition, WBC has sourced a specialist partner, Oxfordshire Mind, to provide support to those suffering from mild to moderate mental health issues, This service includes wellbeing support workers who will talk through issues over a number of sessions, as well as signposting to groups and activities to support them. This service will take referrals from GPs, statutory and voluntary organisations that will be tasked to support the voluntary sector with training, advice and support. This will be in place in the next couple of months and will be based in Wokingham Town Centre, as well as remotely out across the borough. Wokingham Borough Council's also set up a recovery college which provides courses and workshops for people with mental health needs and their carers in the borough. The courses are focused on understanding mental health issues, managing mental health in a positive way and staying well. Courses provide life skill training and access to support to gain employment. They're open to all Wokingham Borough residents over the age of 18 who are free to register with the college. These venue courses are, of course, delivered online at the moment until the community college can open post-COVID.
Right, thank you for that. Can I ask you, Phil, if you have a quick supplementary?
Yeah, sure. Yes, I do, please. I note that you mentioned there's the upcoming service with Mind. Can you give me some examples of how successful they've been in this sort of situation in other areas and how they can achieve it in Wokingham?
Sure. They have a proven track record of implementing large, broad-reaching mental health programmes. They currently hold the contract for the delivery of the Primary Care Wellbeing Project, which has been commissioned by the Oxfordshire CCG, and delivery of Oxfordshire Safe Haven, the out-of-hours service commissioned by Oxfordshire NHS Foundation Trust. Since 2018, when their Primary Care Wellbeing Project was commissioned, they've seen 3,100 people across 32 GP practices. In year 2, they saw 1,500 people across 29 GP practices. Of this number, 185 completed the intervention, leaving the service successfully. 78% reported a significant increase in wellbeing. Satisfaction rates have remained above 90% for both years. The COVID-19 pandemic forced them to shift to a predominantly remote service, but even during this period, they've managed to connect with a large number of service users and to record good outcomes. In April to September 2020, 671 service users accessed the service, 124 finished the intervention, and 79% showed a significant increase in wellbeing. In answer to your question on Wokingham, it's anticipated there could be as many as 1,200 people supported by this service, with 41% expected to go to other services, Citizens Advice, Link, Visiting Scheme, Age UK. This service will coordinate and nurture the voluntary community sector response, creating an alliance approach.
Could I ask you, Councillor Margate, to draw to a close shortly, please, in a few seconds?
Yeah, no, they're going to work with the voluntary sector as well as in local GP practices, so they'll be visible in the community. I think it's a very successful organisation. They're shortly coming to Wokingham, which is great news, and their services will be a real value to our residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That's really good news. Thank you very much.
Good. Can we now go to John Booth to ask his question of Councillor Wayne Smith, please?
Hello, I'm John Booth. I live in Earley, and my question is about local green space designations and the draft local plan update. The site LGS09, the land between Thames Valley Business Park and Napier Road, known locally as Kennet Mouth, has been appraised in the local plan update consultation, but it's recommended not to be designated as a local green space. And in doing this, it says the majority of the site is also surrounded by commercial and employment development, notably Sutton's Business Park and Thames Valley Park, which are dominant in the landscape. But neither of these is apparent or impinges in any way upon the enjoyment of the site, let alone being dominant in the landscape. This is because Sutton's Business Park is behind the embankment of the 1840 Great Western Railway. Thames Valley Business Park is hidden behind Broken Brow. Photos have been sent to the executive member. Councillor Smith, do you agree that the description of the site in the topic paper is misleading and factually incorrect and should be removed from the document?
Councillor Smith.
Evening, Mr. Booth. The draft plan consultation undertaken last year was a key step in the preparation of new planning policies to guide our development. It allowed everyone the opportunity to express their views on what we got right what we got wrong, and things that we could improve on. We are now carefully considering everyone's comments as we decide how we move forward. To comment specifically on the green spaces you refer to, the draft plan considered only a handful of areas that were put forward at the time. Through responses to the draft plan and subsequent correspondence we've had from town and parishes and other members of the public, we have received suggestions for over a further 100 additional local green spaces. In some circumstances, different views that have been put forward by different people as to the extent of the area that might merit designation as local green space, as well as different reasoning. This is the case of the Kennet Mouth that you refer to, where a much wider area has been promoted, including much greater supporting information to explain its suitability for designation in a local green space. Recommendations on the merits across the borough will be reported to Executive later on this year as we prepare for our next draft plan. As you will be aware, it is not appropriate for me to comment on any merits of an individual proposal at this time. However, I can assure you that the views of the respondents will be considered as we move forward, including any matters you refer to when necessary and justified as we move forward with our draft proposal, and all those items will be amended.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Mr. Booth, do you have a quick supplementary at all?
Yes, I'm very pleased that there was this supplementary consultation which came out, I think, in May after the main consultation was over, which allowed many groups to make their views known, and I'm sure accounted for many of the 100 extra proposals. I suppose the supplementary question, maybe you've already answered it, but will the council recommend the designation of the site as a local green space? And if not, why not?
Well, as I said, I think you know my credentials being on the planning committee that saved this site through the MRT proposal, so I don't think you need to question my integrity and what can be done, but I can assure you that they will be looked at. And what I can say, the proposals now are far stronger than what was submitted originally, because you submitted a very small space, but now we've got the whole of the area that banks the river, which would make it, well, as I said, a lot stronger. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now go on to Helen Palmer, please, to ask your question, also of Councillor Wayne Smith. Helen Palmer, are you there? Earth calling Mars, is anyone there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can now, yes.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
I don't know if you can see me. Anyway, good evening, everybody. I'm also asking a question referring to the topic paper Local Green Space, accompanying the draft local plan update, and again referring to the land between Thames Valley Business Park and Napier Road. The update states the site holds no formal recreational or historical value. The route, being free from motorised traffic and running between green space and the river, is heavily used by walkers, runners and cyclists, including many locals who have health issues restricting the distance they can walk. Others come from farther afield to follow the Thames Path or National Cycle Route 4. The Thames Path is a lovely route, nationally and internationally renowned. Walking it myself, I met several groups of people who had come from overseas specifically to walk this path. It would be a local disgrace to allow our section of this famous path to be spoilt, for example, by a main road, bringing air and noise pollution. During lockdown, heavy use led to creation of a second path along the Thames Path, allowing for social distancing. This land should not be narrowed by infrastructure. Will councillors ask the officers to strike out the statement in the topic paper and substitute a statement that reflects the recreational importance of this site?
Over to you, Councillor Smith.
Evening, Helen. My response will be very similar to the one that I just given Mr. Booth, but I can expand. I will expand on a point that you refer to. But let me just go through this, and then perhaps in your supplementary, if you raise the point that Mr. Booth raised, I can respond then. As mentioned previously, the consultation on the draft plan last year was an opportunity to everyone to express their views, which I'm sure you did, and look at what we got right, what we got wrong, and things we can improve on. The draft plan considered only a handful of areas, of which the site that you refer to was one that was put forward. And in the next step, the process, we invited towns and parishes that were invited originally, but there was little correspondence that came forward, and other community groups and organisations to identify areas of green spaces, of which the number has now gone up to in excess of 100, as previously mentioned. Different views have been put forward to the extent of the area that might merit designation, as well as the different reasoning. In addition, the smaller proportion, and I must emphasise, the site that was put forward, and I don't know who put it forward, was a very, very small site that you refer to. So it wouldn't encompass all of the dialogue you've just mentioned in terms of the recreation area. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of what site you put forward, but it was a very small site, including. So we've now got further information supporting to explain the suitability for designation. As I said earlier, it wouldn't be appropriate for me at this stage, because we have got quite some time to go through, and before we take the merits of the next local plan and we take the local green spaces to executive. But we can assure you that the outcomes will be documented in a future update, and any changes will be updated on the topic paper, will be available to view and comment on in a future consultation that I hope will go out this summer.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Ms Palmer, do you have a very brief supplementary at all?
I think Mr. Smith has covered it for me. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Good. So we move on then now. Andrew Menny, can you ask your question of Councillor Ullacrin Clark, please? Andrew Menny, are you there? Few more seconds and we'll move on. Right. As he's not there or not been able to ask his question, he will get a written answer then. I'm getting a message saying that he is there, but he's not responding. Is Andrew Menny on the system somewhere? And if he is, can he please respond promptly?
He is there, but I don't think he's able to get his sound going.
Okay. Well, in that case, he will receive a written reply to his question. Thank you. Move then on to Carol Jewell to ask her question of Councillor Pauline Jorgensen. I don't know if Councillor Jorgensen has arrived yet. She might be late or absent. And in her absence, I believe Councillor Halsall will answer the question. So would you be able to do that, please, Councillor Halsall?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, sir.
Right. So, Carol Jewell, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yes, thank you very much. I share the concern of residents over the dangerous crossing point along Barder Way in Woodley, where it is intersected by the path from Kingsford Close, which comes off of Colmers Moor Road, towards Mortimer's Meadows and Dinton Pastures. I am aware that a change in the speed limit is being discussed at borough level, but more immediate action really needs to be taken. What is the council doing to address this dangerous crossing point? That is A, between two bends on a fast road, B, needs much better signage, and C, should be clearly marked. Thank you.
Councillor Halsall, if you'd like to respond, please.
Good evening, Carol. Officers are aware of concerns raised by users of the footpath between the Moors open space and Dinton Pastures and the safety crossing Barder Way. The existing informal crossing point is used seasonally, with crossing activity fluctuating over the year. There's been a noticeable increase in crossing movements and concerns raised during the COVID pandemic. There are, however, suitable alternatives that allow pedestrians to cross Barder Way more easily, both in the south by walking under the bridge that takes Barder Way across the River Loddon, and to the north by using the uncontrolled crossing points at the Barder Way Mohawk Way roundabout. The Barder Way is subject to the national speed limit, and data indicates that speed limit compliance is generally good, despite some instances of speeds in excess of the limit during off-peak hours, with average off-peak hour speeds below 40 miles per hour and off-peak average speeds of 53 miles per hour. The existing speed limit is considered appropriate, and any reduction is unlikely to secure the support of Thames Valley Police. As a distributor road, the function of the road is to carry high volumes of traffic between separate areas of the borough. Despite being a busy connecting route, gaps in the traffic present opportunities for pedestrians to cross the road safely. It would not, however, be considered safe to introduce a formal pedestrian crossing facility on a high-speed road without a reduction in the speed limit and physical measures to support this, which would be in contradiction of the road's function and purpose. The road has a generally good safety record with 6 reported injury collisions in the past 10-year period, of which 4 involved slight injury and 2 were serious, but none involving a pedestrian. In the vicinity of the existing crossing point, 1 slight collision was recorded, a single vehicle incident in which a vehicle hit an object in the road. 100 metres southwest of the crossing, notwithstanding this, officers have undertaken site assessment of the existing seasonal facility, and a scheme to improve driver awareness of the likelihood of pedestrians crossing whilst maintaining adequate signage is currently awaiting implementation.
Thank you, Councillor Halsall. Can I ask, Ms. Jewell, do you have a brief supplementary at all?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Councillor Halsall, for that answer. I must admit I'm disappointed with it, but probably not surprised. And I think I would question that it's seasonal in terms of COVID and encouraging more people to walk. The signs that warn of the crossing are 400 yards before the actual crossing. There's no signage near the crossing point. Would you agree that extra and closer signage would provide increased safety for pedestrians and better warning for motorists, as well as reflectors on the wooden bollards?
Councillor Halsall.
I'm not in a position to agree. I've taken on this brief, so I'll have to respond to that in writing from the officers.
Thank you, Councillor. Next is Mike Smith. Would you like to ask your question? Well, it's also meant to be Councillor Jorgensen, but in her absence, it's back to you, please, Councillor Halsall. So, Mike Smith, would you like to ask your question then?
Yes, I'm here. I'll try and paraphrase it to save time. Back in June 2020, I asked about the state of the footbridge across the railway and motorway at Early Station. So 9 months on, I'd quite like to know what is the status of the funded and planned replacement of that footbridge?
Councillor?
As you probably know, Mike, Wokingham has commenced a project to replace the WBC-owned footbridge, which links Nightingale Road in Woodley to the Early Station forecourt, but not to the platforms. The project is currently at the detailed design stage, and for the avoidance of doubt, will be Equalities Act compliant with both ramp and stair access. Network Rail were approached as part of the design process to seek their collaboration specifically around incorporating access onto their platforms. Unfortunately, Network Rail have informed the council they are not interested in a collaboration at this time, and consequently we are unable to include this element within this project. Ultimately, it is Network Rail's responsibility to ensure that access to their platforms are compliant with the Equalities Act. And whilst we, as a council, are willing to collaborate, we are unable to compel them to undertake the works.
Thank you. And Mr. Smith, do you have a brief supplementary at all?
Well, yes. I mean, I'm very concerned about the state of the bridge. If you went and had a close look at it yourself, you'd see that there is significant and advanced spalling of the concrete uprights and sections. So it's good to hear that it's in detailed design stage. It's disappointing to hear that it's not been picked up by Network Rail, but it's obviously not in their funding programme for the next 5 years. Could the council incorporate features into the design so that some future stage, perhaps disabled access could be allowed?
Okay.
We certainly can look at that, Mike. We can certainly look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of the public question time. We now move on to agenda item 78, which is petitions. Does anyone wish to hand in a petition at all this evening? If you do, can you raise a hand so I get a yellow hand signal on the screen? I'm scrolling down, I can't see any hands. No. So there are no petitions. No one's mentioning tonight. So we'll move on to agenda item 79, which is the review of members' allowances. And my notes here say that speaking on this, presenting the report will be Diana Anderson, David Harwood, Bob Nancaro, Ian Newlove, and Angela Slade. And they are going to present the report on behalf of the Independent Remuneration Panel. So would you collectively like to begin your presentation, please?
Good evening, councillors. Bob Nancaro here. The present Independent Review Panel consists of, as you said, David Harwood, Diana Anderson, Angela Slade, Ian Newlove, and myself. If I could just have a little preamble before I get on to the report. The IRP is a continued body out of a statutory instrument of government since 2003, and all borough councils have an IRP. It exists to monitor and advise in a purely voluntary basis without remuneration. We, as the incumbent panel, assembled in November 2019. We have met early on in our deliberations, we issued a survey questionnaire to all 54 members. 34 responses were gratefully received, and they helped guide us in our task. We thank those members. We have met mainly virtually on 15 occasions, have discussions with 16 members, 4 of them a second time, and we have built our report around both the survey and discussion findings. All the meetings were cordial and helpful, and we thank all participants. The second meeting with 4 councillors took place on the 18th of December last to consider our draft report. This was to give those councillors and representatives of each sector of the membership the opportunity to give an opinion and make any recommendations regarding the efficacy of acceptance by their respective membership. We did receive recommendations of a non-substance or materiality nature, which we incorporated in that report. As such, the report was acceptable before the new year. We thank those members for the second meeting and for liaising with their groups. We also met with the chief executives at the outset of our tenure and the mayor and deputy mayor, and they are thanked too. The current budget is some 630,000 to include remuneration and expense reimbursement. Approximately 4,500 pounds of remuneration was declined last financial year. It is not known how much expense reimbursement was not sought, but probably a fair sum. We are aware and wish others, especially the borough residents, to be aware that 50% of members' time is deemed voluntary and 50% remunerated. It is not for the panel to save on funding. Indeed, we wish all that is allocated is used towards its proper intended purpose fairly and equitably. Any sums left unclaimed in the budget are subject of virement to the benefit of other council expense. I will now read the recommendations, please. It is within the body of the report, but it is the most salient feature of the presentation. The recommendation is that the Council agrees that no changes are made to the basic allowance for the financial years consisting of 2021 and 2021 and 22. Originally, we at our meeting had resolved that 0.5% to 1% should be added to this year, but the next day we heard of the freeze, so we had to come back and say nothing. The £500 component of the basic allowance for the provision of IT should only be claimed by those members who provide facilities which allow constituents and officers to communicate with them by email. In addition to having adequate equipment and connections to allow for effective participation in virtual meetings and self-certification process relating to this component of the basic allowance is to be continued. Number 3, recommendation 3, no changes are made to any of the existing rates for special responsibility allowance. Recommendation 4, no changes are made to the travel and subsistence allowance. We did show special interest in climate change, and perhaps for a future time, we want to maybe encourage greener travel without using fossil fuel, but for the moment, no changes are made to the travel and subsistence allowance. 5, no changes are made to the mayoral and deputy mayoral allowances. 6, the dependent and carers allowance is to be restructured to the following from April 2021. And could I say, we have raised this rate quite a bit because one of our interests was that we want to use the remuneration and expense scheme to promote diversity in applicants to be councillors, and we want to make it easier for them. So what we've decided is a maximum claimable rate of £10 an hour to be instated, to rise with a national living wage as and when this overtakes the stated figure. The rate is claimable by members with direct caring responsibilities and should primarily be used for non-specialist childcare, for example, babysitting. A maximal claimable rate of £20 an hour be instated to rise by the same monetary increases granted to Part 1 of the Dependent and Carers Allowance. This rate is claimable by members with direct caring responsibilities and should be used for specialist care. For example, medically trained staff care, including mental health, care for a number of young children, for which a babysitter would not be appropriate, care which includes lifting or moving an adolescent or adult. However, we require an invoice of any description in order to claim for this rate. Both of the aboves are to be claimable up to a combined maximum 35 hours total per month, and the carer must not be a member of the councillor's family that lives in the same address. In exceptional circumstances, claim above the 35-hour monthly limit can be agreed with the lead specialist for democratic and electoral services, subject to provision of suitable evidence. Recommendation 7. During the next municipal year, when the review of members' allowances is not required, the IRP are given permission to publish a press release in local news and via Woking Borough Council media sources with administrative support from democratic service officers. I now would I would welcome questions, but could I just say, first of all, before I ask for questions and welcome questions, I'd like to offer my sincerest thanks to my colleague members of the panel. All have given their time freely and cheerfully and have been determined to make a success of their efforts through the report. We have constructive plans for the future in support of the members, but that's for another time. In the meantime, I commend this report and recommendations to the council. Thank you. And if you have any questions, please would you let us have them? And I will probably ask members of the panel to answer them where it's in their special interest.
Mr. Mayor, you're on mute.
Sorry, I turned it off accidentally. It is not normal to ask questions, specific questions for the IRP at this stage. We need to go through the normal process of the report being proposed and seconded, and then, if necessary, amended or challenged, whatever, and people speaking at that stage. So if you have finished your submission, your presentation, Mr. Nancarrow, I will move on to the point. I understand that this report is to be proposed by Councillor John Halsall. Is that the case, Councillor Halsall?
Yes, sir.
Yes. And do you have a seconder for it?
Yes, he does, Mr. Mayor.
And who is that?
Myself, John Kaiser.
Yes. Okay. So proposed by Councillor Halsall, seconded by Councillor Kaiser. Councillor Halsall, you can now speak for up to 3 minutes, and starting now if you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the members of the IRP for doing a very difficult task of reviewing the members' allowance scheme, which is unrewarded and can be unacknowledged. Despite being an instinctive supporter of low taxes, I do not support the concept that councillors' allowances should be reduced or remain at the current level. This is short-sighted and will be completely counterproductive. I am staggered at the total cost of such allowances as low as it is. Members give up huge amounts of their time to serve their local communities. And if the sums in question were broken down over the hours served, the rate for most councils would be demonstrably insulting. Very few members claim the expenses which they're entitled to because they think their residents would take a dim view of it, and the taxpayer should not be burdened. Despite the generally altruistic desire to serve in public office, the current arrangements in some areas are liable not to attract candidates of the right calibre, properly to set strategic objectives and to hold senior management to account. Councillors today, particularly during the pandemic, are in some cases taking decisions which impact directly on the life chances and the quality of life of thousands of their residents. Nothing has impressed me more than the way in which some of my colleagues have stepped up to the plate to provide real leadership. Very few have had to take such important decisions in their personal lives. The allowances are really paltry and not the motivation of most councillors. Take the allowance away and the political consequence is the debarring from public office of the whole sections of the population, particularly carers and single parents, and those whose income ties them to a business or job with no flexibility. In short, the role starts to make sense only for those who no longer must work. Over recent years, the IRP has made recommendations which the members have felt unable to accept. The panel has subsequently resigned. The current IRP have resisted this temptation and have limited themselves to recommendations that dependent and carers allowances be restructured. However, at the next review, members must be prepared to accept more radical increases if we are to avoid councillors who are self-selecting bunch of largely retired white men, because that's what they will get if the allowances do not attract individuals of calibre or motivation or of decision-making experience. I would like to propose the acceptance of all the recommendations of the IRP, and again express my heartfelt thanks to the panel for doing a very, very difficult job for us.
Thank you, Councillor Halsall. Councillor Kaiser, do you wish to speak as the seconder? Do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
And I'll speak now, just to say that I reiterate the leader's thanks to the panel for their time, hard work and commitment. While there's no review next year, this is an area which we need to be mindful if we are to avoid the dangers that the leader points out. I'm pleased to second this proposition from the leader. Thank you, Mayor.
Right, thank you, Councillor Kaiser. So at that stage, bear with me, I just need to check something.
I've had my hand up. It's Councillor Lindsay Ferris for a long time.
Yes, I know you do. Right, so Councillor Ferris, would you like to speak now? And then I believe Councillor Croy is second on the list behind you. Yes. Please speak now.
Thank you. The Liberal Democrat Group supports the IRP recommendations. It is certainly not the right time to change or increase any of the allowances, particularly as so many members of the public have had financial issues due to COVID-19. There are forecasts of increased levels of unemployment, plus many people now have little or no likelihood of any sort of pay rise. It would be inappropriate to agree to any increase in allowances. We also feel it is inappropriate for us as councillors to vote on revisions to allowances in any way other than to note the proposals. We also appreciate the greater transparency given by the IRP, and that was something new this year, and it was very much appreciated that they put their proposals out in the paper, and they said at the time when we had the discussions they would do that, and that I think is very forward thinking of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is Councillor Andy Croy. Would you like to speak now, Councillor Croy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to propose an amendment to the recommendations, and I've circulated the amendment in the chat.
And do you have a seconder for it?
Yes, I'm seconding it, Councillor Burgess.
Okay, Rachel Burgess. Okay, so would you like to speak then, Councillor Croy?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd also like to thank Bob, Nancaro and the other volunteers of the panel who've given up so much of their time to prepare the report. I welcome the improvements to the dependents and carers allowance, and I do encourage members who are carers to ensure that they are not out of pocket because of their joint counsellor and caring responsibilities. I also welcome the stronger language around members having adequate IT provision. It is simply unacceptable for members not to have access to a decent laptop. For some reason, it always seems to be Conservative members who suffer this problem, and it is simply not right. They are given £500 a year for IT, and they need to spend it on IT. I'm proposing the amendment on the basic allowance, as it is the right thing to do. 2010 marks the beginning of austerity. The burden of austerity was a political choice. The continued Conservative underfunding of our borough is also a political choice. We have had a decade of it, 10 years of austerity and underfunding. The strains of the pandemic has compounded what has gone before, and we also now have a political choice to make, but it's also a moral choice. Residents expect us to demonstrate that we get it. We get that people are losing their jobs and using up their savings. We get that family incomes are reduced. We get that businesses are struggling and failing. We get that finding the cash to pay for mortgages and rent is increasingly an issue. And we get that more families than ever rely on free school meals. Residents want to know we are on their side. They want to hear it loud and clear. What better way of sending a message is there than cutting our allowance? Labour councillors on this council have always set their allowance at the 2010 level. Join us. To voluntarily cut your income is a powerful statement to make, and I urge, with the greatest respect to the panel, that all members make the right choice now. Please vote for the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Croy. Do you seconder, which is Councillor Rachel Burgess, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
Yes, I'll speak now, thank you.
Please do so now then.
Thank you. First, I would also like to thank the independent review panel for their work. They've clearly done a very thorough job, all voluntarily, and I certainly appreciate that they took the time to meet with me and hear my views. However, in the current climate, I believe accepting the current level of councillor expenses would be wrong. We continue to contend with the effects of a long period of sustained Conservative austerity. As we are frequently reminded, this authority has experienced the full force of cuts, with a massive reduction in revenue support grant, causing vital services to be cut back or scrapped altogether. Our residents are suffering the needless effects of this austerity every day. Against this backdrop, we cannot give our support to the current level of councillor pay, which has risen frequently in recent years for no justifiable reason. Labour has repeatedly voted against these rises year after year, and while I welcome the fact that no rise is proposed this year, we cannot support the level of pay as it is. Here in the Labour group, as Councillor Croy said, all of our allowances remain frozen at 2010 levels, the year that austerity began. More than ever, taxpayers expect their money to be spent wisely, so we cannot support the current level of councillor pay, and that is why I support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've had the presentation, we've had the proposer and seconder, Halsall and Kaiser. We've also received now an amendment from Councillor Croy and Burgess. Can I ask you, Councillor Halsall, if you accept the amendment proposed by Councillor Croy?
No, Mr. Mayor.
You do not. Okay, bear with me. Necessary pages. Right. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Please show by
Mr. Mayor, I wish to speak on it. Stephen Conway.
Stephen Conway. Okay. Please speak. And if there's anyone else, please put your hands up if you wish to speak. Yes, fire away, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm afraid we cannot support this amendment. We have an independent panel to make recommendations in order to depoliticise the matter of councillors' remuneration. It follows, therefore, that we should really be accepting the recommendations of an independent panel, not seeking to amend them. I'm afraid I have to say that the amendment is a deliberate attempt to politicise this matter. Of course, any member can choose to decide not to take the full allowance offered to them. But I think we really do need to remember, and this was a point made very well by Mr. Nankara in his presentation of the report, that we should be doing everything we can to enable all members of our community to be able to become councillors, not just those who can afford it. And I always understood that that was the position of the proposer of this amendment. And I'm slightly surprised to see him proposing an amendment that would actually make it more difficult for people on low incomes to be able to become councillors. But for the reasons I've said, and principally because this is an independent report from an independent panel coming up with independent recommendations, we should be supporting those and not supporting this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Conway. Another person has their hand up, which is Councillor Pauline Hellyer-Simons. Would you like to speak, Pauline?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd also like to thank the panel for the enormous amount of work they've obviously put into this report. And I particularly welcome the fact that they are wanting to improve the carer's allowance. I'm not a carer myself, so I've got no vested interest. But I know from those that are that it can be a real stress trying to find somebody to look after the person you're caring for, whether they're elderly, infirmed or young. So thank you for that. Speaking to Andy Croy's amendment, I can't support that. And just to be absolutely clear about it, £86 a month is what it would come to if that reduction were put into practice, and that comes to just over £1,000 a year, £1,032 to be precise. And so I think that Andy Croy's amendment is quite basically just political posturing, just to make the point, not really to save the council any significant money at all. And I do hope that, given that amendment, that none of the Labour councillors will be taking their allowance this year.
Thank you, Councillor Hellyer-Simons. The next hand I can see is Councillor Carl Doran. Councillor Doran, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, in response to that that's just been said, let me just say that I have not taken anything but the 2010 level of allowances since I became a councillor. So I'm already there, basically, and have been for several years. And also, I'm a bit worried about the maths that was just used. £86 times 54 councillors equals £1,000. Not sure how that works, but anyway, it's usual. I hope the maths improves before the budget. I just want to make the quick point that I have 2 young children. I have a full-time job, which I'm actually on call for as we speak. I was working until 6 this evening, and Councillor Helly Simmons is right. It's a very small amount. So the question is, why do you not want to lose it? I would need a very large increase for this councillor role to match my job, and it's never going to do that. So the idea of saying an extra £80 here for people to work when they're they have other things going on, it's just it's not a massive amount of money for people. The majority, well, I don't know anybody here who is in a caring position where they're on very low pay or no pay. Everybody here is relatively well off, I believe, and I think you could all stomach it. Some might not be able to, but I think you could all.
Right, thank you, Councillor Doran. I see here Councillor Gary Cowan. He's got his hand up. Councillor Cowan?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do support the recommendations of the IRP. The only comment I would make, and it's been made before by various members, is that every year we end up with some sort of political issue when we come to debating this issue, and I would like us to look next year, when it's really a fallow year, look at maybe the opportunity by which the council would change its constitution. I know they don't like doing that, but at least change the constitution to a point where we would just accept the recommendation of the IRP, and that we wouldn't have a political debate. And that's all I'd like to say. I will support the recommendations of the IRP.
Right. Thank you. So you've still got your hand up, Councillor Cowan, if you can take that down. Right. The Councillor Halsall next, since no other hands are up. Councillor Halsall, as the proposer of the original... Sorry, bear with me, I need to check something. I'm not reading this correctly. Right, Councillor Halsall, as the proposer of the original motion, would you like to have your right to reply? You can speak now, if you will. You have up to 3 minutes.
What am I replying to, the amendment or my motion, Mr. Mayor?
The amendment, yes. The amendment has just been discussed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We appoint an IRP who works very hard, and they make recommendations. And that's the way that the system's supposed to work. If the allowances for councillors are too high, then there's a cost to the council. But if they're too low, we're not attracting the people across the community we should attract. And that's why we have an independent remuneration panel. We are blessed with a panel which has worked very, very hard, consulted loads of people, been very aware of the political climate in which we live, and I cannot see any reason why we should deviate one semicolon or sentence from their recommendations. I agree with everything that Stephen Conway said. This is just a political stunt, and we should reject it. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Halsall. So now, well, we need to vote on the amendment. There are several recommendations in there. just the amendment. Yes, so we're going to do the vote on the, just trying to read my message. Going to vote on the amendment, and I'm going to use the hands up options. So can you all please ensure, I can't see any, but can you please ensure that if your hand is up, that you take it down? All hands to go down, please. Okay, so now I'm going to take those who are going to vote for this issue. And that's just a moment, I'll make sure whether that's the amendment or. You're now going to vote on Councillor Croy's amendment, and we're going to use the hands up. All the hands should be down right now, and we're going to ask those who wish to vote for the amendment. Can you please use the hands up feature now? Okay. Take the hands down again, please. And then Andy Croy, your hand. Oh, right. All hands are down. Good. We're now going to ask for those who want to vote against this amendment. So if you wish to vote against it, please use the hand signal now, please. Okay, take your hands down, please. All of you take hands down.
Sorry, it wasn't letting me vote. Now I can vote. Sorry.
Okay, it'll be included. Right, thank you. So we've done the fors and the against. All hands down, please. All of them.
Mr. Mayor, I was unable to get to the hands free. I wish to vote against Angus Ross.
And who's that, please, speaking?
Councillor Ross.
Councillor Ross. And you wish to vote? Did you say for or against? Against. Thank you.
Against.
Right. Now, if there are any hands up, take them down. We're going to do those who wish to abstain. Okay. So if you wish to abstain, please use the hands up feature now. Right. I've got the results. The agreement is not, amendment is not agreed. Okay. Thank you. So now we go back to, just a moment. You turn my pages. Now we go back to the recommendations as set out in the agenda, which is the original IRP ones. We go back to that debate. Thank you. So now we return to the original debate of the original proposal. Does anyone wish to speak? If you do, please raise your hands. No? Okay. So, Councillor Halsall, would you like to have your right to replay, please, for up to 3 minutes?
Sorry, Malcolm, I was late there. Could I make a very quick comment?
Yes, okay. Very quick comment. Please do.
Thank you very, very much. I'd just like to pick up on something that John, the leader, said in his response. Did he say that we should be expecting big pay rises next time? Is that what he was saying?
I don't think so. It's a question of personal interpretation of what anyone else ever says, but I don't think that was the case at all.
I was hoping John could address that. I wasn't asking you.
Oh, okay.
Although thank you for your assistance.
Councillor Halsall, would you wish to comment on that? No? Okay, right. So back to Councillor Halsall. You have the right to reply. Do you want to do your right to reply now, please?
Mr. Mayor, I didn't think that a council meeting was a dialogue, but there you go. No, I did not say that. I'm very conscious of the tension between what members get paid in allowances or remuneration and the cost to the council. I did say for the leader of the Labour group that I'm a supporter, an instinctive supporter of low taxes, and therefore I think that says it all. But there is a case for changing the allowances, which will be reviewed in the future by the future IRP, to see whether they would attract a rather more diverse group of councillors or not. Having said that, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to conclude by recommending the recommendations in full from the IRP, and again thanking them for all their hard work and their dogged persistence in a very difficult climate. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Halsall. So at this point now, I would also like to thank the IRP for their contribution to the report and their details. And I am intending to go to the vote on the recommendations as they are set out in the report. And there are currently about, just a moment, please. I need to check something. Like to say something? I understand you may be wishing to make a request.
Yes,
or just ask a question.
I was just asking, Mr. Mayor, if we could have split voting, if we could vote on item 1 separately to items 2 to 7, please. Thank you.
Yes, okay, that's fine. Thank you for that request. Don't have a problem with that. So we will therefore vote on...
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
The opposition is continuously talking about time wasting and getting through the agenda of the council meeting. This is real time wasting and has been for the last 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thanks for that comment, Councillor Halsall. This is a request to do the voting in 2 chunks, 1 single and 1 block, which I am able to accept as a valid approach. And so we will therefore take the recommendation 1 separately and then recommendations 2 to 7 on block afterwards. And so we will do it by the hands up the usual way. Could everybody please make sure their hands are down? Are they all down? I can't see any. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to make a factual correction to what the leader said.
Okay, briefly.
This is Stephen Conway.
Yes.
He referred to the opposition. The Liberal Democrats are the opposition on the council.
Thank you for that correction, Councillor Conway. Thank you. Okay, so we'll do the vote on recommendation 1 now. All hands are down. Anyone who wishes to vote for the recommendation 1, please use the hands up feature now, please. Okay, so please everybody take their hands down. Just look.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Ross, again, my computer would not allow me to raise my hand. Ah, it has now.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, it's Councillor Lindsay Ferris. Mine's doing the same, so I'll try again. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
And possibly also Councillor Andrew Mickleborough. I am voting for this.
Okay,
Yes,
so it's 3 4s in a row. Any more for any more on the 4s? No, okay. And if you can't get the hand to raise, please interrupt and say, tell us what your vote is verbally. But I think we've got them all okay for that. Okay, so all hands down. Anyone still up, please put them down. And we will now go to the vote on recommendation 1 where you wish to vote against it. If you wish to vote against, please vote now. Okay, so they're all down anyway, but I will say if anyone has a hand up, please take it down. We now go into we're now going to put an abstain. And so if you wish to abstain on this, we've had the forwards, had the against. If you wish to abstain, please vote now to abstain. Okay, take hands down, please. And the recommendations are agreed for recommendation 1. Thank you. We now move to a vote process again for the remaining recommendations in the agenda, which are recommendations 2 to 7, and we are doing those en bloc. So same process, all hands down, please. They looks to be the case. If you wish to vote for recommendations 2 to 7, please use your hand up now. Okay, so put the hands down. Did anyone have a problem with raising their hands at that point that would want to speak? To tell us verbally? No? Okay, so all hands down, and we're going to take the vote now for recommendations 2 to 7 for those who wish to vote against. If you wish to vote against, please raise your hands now. Okay, so all hands down, and we move to the abstain. So if you wish to abstain on this vote for recommendations 2 to 7, please raise your hand now. And again, are there any people whose hands up didn't vote and they need to confirm verbally? No? Okay. The recommendations for 2 to 7 are agreed. Thank you for that participation. And we now go to agenda item 80, which is care and support procurement. And I understand this is to be proposed by Councillor Charles Margetts. Councillor Margetts, are you going to propose this report? Is that correct?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor.
And do you have a seconder?
Yes, Councillor Richard Delinsky.
Richard Delinsky. Okay, thank you. So in that case, Councillor Margetts, you can speak on this proposal for up to 3 minutes, if you'd like to begin now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking for support tonight to proceed with the care and support procurement package as detailed in pages 59 to 80 of the agenda. Adult services within Wokingham have the stated aim of moving into the top 10% of departments in the UK within all recognised measures. This programme is a key step along the road. We wish to move all of our home care and supported living services into a procurement framework. The total value of these contracts are £14 million per annum, £74 million over 5 years, allowing for inflation. During 2018 to 19, 1,860 people received support and care services commissioned by WBC. 1,320 received the support in their own home. Traditionally, sourcing suppliers were split between WBC and Optalis, with the majority of procurement being done by Optalis. However, when we moved the brokerage function of Optalis in-house in December 2019, there was the opportunity to look at this area and find a better and more efficient system. The framework will be public and displayed on the council website. It will clearly and transparently show the standards WBC expects from its providers. To qualify, any supplier will have to meet clearly defined standards in terms of quality, around care delivery, general quality of service, safeguarding, equal opportunities and business continuity. The framework will always be open to new suppliers. All providers will be checked for quality and will have to submit KPIs. They will enable us to quickly identify any issues and work with the provider to seek a remedy. Key KPIs will be demand management, support and planning, innovation, use of technology, staff recruitment, training, and most importantly, performance. WBC will have the right to suspend placements to providers who fail to hit these standards and to ultimately to end contracts if there is a consistent failure to perform. We will not be forcing all contracts to end at the start of the framework. Therefore, if an existing supplier does not want to move on to the framework, the contract will continue. There will always be continuity of care to residents, and this change should only improve the service. The framework will enable us to improve quality by developing longer lasting relationships with providers. Contracts will typically be for 5 years. This will also give the WBC staff the ability to get to know and understand all part of the supplier's business. The framework will enable us to advertise what we need across the country. It's possible that some existing providers will not continue. However, evidence where this has been used elsewhere has always shown a rise. This model has been used successfully in Surrey County Council, Coventry Council, and the London Borough of Brent. In all three examples, the approach has driven up quality while enabling control of the market in terms of cost and inflation. Subject to agreement, we're looking to put this into place from July 2021. I'm asking Council to support this procurement framework and to support our continuous quest for higher standards and better quality for residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. That was good timing. Councillor Dalisky, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
I'd like to speak now, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, then please do so. Thank you.
Okay, I will be brief as there's clearly a lot of business to conclude this evening. The key to this support and care procurement is to ensure high quality of choice of service that provides a personalised support and safeguarding for our residents. It's essential that we support and enable residents to remain as independent as long as possible in their own homes and within their community and not in residential care homes. The average life expectancy in a UK care home is only 1 to 2 years. Therefore, it remains an advantage to those who can live independently in their own home and be active within their community. The Care Act explicitly says that local authority adult services must help to improve people's independence and well-being. In addition, local authorities must provide or arrange services in partnership with their community to help prevent people developing needs or delay people deteriorating, such that they would need ongoing care and support. Much, if not all of this work is already being delivered. However, this support and care procurement will strengthen our position to deliver even better outcomes for our residents. Therefore, I have no hesitation, absolutely no hesitation in supporting all recommendations and ask all members for their support too. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
My speaker was off. Thank you, Councillor Drisky. Does anyone else wish to speak on this? If you do, please raise your hand.
I've got my hand up.
Right, that's Councillor David Hare.
Yes.
Yes, would you like to speak now, please?
Yes, I'd like to thank the Adult Social Services care officers for their hard work providing this excellent report to improve financial return. The procurement exercise will enable adult social care to commission more economically weighted, high quality care for vulnerable adults in need of supported living or home care. This must be seen as a positive move to enable the adult care to move towards a more cost-effective method of commissioning the services necessary for care for vulnerable adults that also improves quality. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hare. I see that Councillor Croy's hand is up as well. Andy Croy, would you like to speak?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I've got 2 points really. The first one is my understanding is that the main cost of care is wages, and I am concerned that if we are going to squeeze suppliers in any way, that there is a risk that the people who actually do the work on the ground, the care workers, who most of whom are on very low wages, will end up being squeezed. So that's a concern. And my other concern, I think we should also think about as a council is I'm not seeing that this has come in front of any of the scrutiny committees. Now, if we're talking about changing the way we manage a big chunk of our budget, should it not come in front of one of the scrutiny committees first? If it has done, I haven't seen that written down, and I apologise, but in the summing up, could either the proposal or the second address the question of whether or not this will be scrutinised? Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? If you do, please raise your hand. No, there are no other hands. Right, okay, so in that case, Councillor Margetts, would you like to have your right to reply on this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I mean, I'll be brief and just try and wrap up a couple of points. I'm grateful to Councillor Hare and Councillor Delinsky for their support. What I will say in response to Councillor Croy is we've been on a system basically of procuring contracts which has been done on a spot basis historically for the reasons I explained, that the contract that things have been split between Optalis and WBC. The reason we're able to do this is the move to bring the brokerage service actually back in-house and to have a look at the whole package. Evidence from other councils who've gone down this road has shown there's been no evidence that it puts downward pressure on carers' wages that can be seen. What I should say is obviously the majority of WBC staff are actually in commissioning, and the actual standards of this, as I've said, will be public and will be clearly published on the website. So it will be open and available for people to scrutinise, yourself and others, as you want. We do not wish to see carers' wages downgraded. We're very much aware that care staff, basically, in comparison to their equivalents within the health service, are paid 30% less, and that's something we wish to see corrected as much as we possibly can. In response to your other question, this has been through executive. I do not know the answer about basically whether it needs to go through scrutiny or not, but I will find out and get back to you directly on this.
Thank you, Councillor Margetts. So now I'm intending to go to the vote on the recommendations as they are set out in the report. So round the same loop, please make sure all your hands are down. No hand signals visible.
Mr. Mayor, can I just come back on something very quickly, please?
Yes, briefly, yes.
I've got the answer to Councillor Croy's question already.
Oh, okay, good.
We're very happy to scrutinise, basically, the implementation, but we would request that, this is a key way that we're going to improve quality and service within the borough. And the issue like that, happy to scrutinise, happy to appear, happy to discuss it and answer any questions. But we don't want this to hold up the procurement, because the people who will suffer from that will be our residents.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So now then, I am intending to go to the vote on the recommendations as set out in the report. So as I said, all hands down, please. We are going to be using the hands up facility on Teams, as you are now all very familiar with. All hands are down. So anyone who wishes to vote for, please use the hands up now. Okay, so can you take all your hands down again, please? And now we're going to go to the against vote. If you wish to vote against this proposal, you please put the hands up feature now. Okay, could you take all hands down, please? And now we're going to do the abstentions. If you wish to abstain on this, Please use the hands up feature now. Okay, I should ask, I think that if you don't have a hands up feature or it didn't show as you wanted, if you need to tell us, you need to do that now. Otherwise, in a few seconds, we'll give you the result. Okay, recommendations are in fact all agreed. Thank you for that, councillors. So move on to the next item, which is agenda item 81, the council tax base. I understand this is to be proposed by Councillor John Kaiser. So, Councillor Kaiser, I understand you're going to propose this, is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
And do you have a seconder?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor.
And who is that?
John Horsell is my seconder.
Good, thank you. That's covered. Now, at this stage, Councillor Kaiser, you can speak for up to 3 minutes on this item. Would you like to start now?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope to get through this very quickly. It's annual housekeeping. Basically, what we do is we record the number of sorry, Mr. Mayor. We record the number of homes that we have in the borough that are subject to council tax. We have seen an increase again this year, which shows that the borough is growing. It's 1.75%, and really it's there to allow the borough and all constituency parts so that the precept can be set by parishes and towns alike. And the recommendation is quite simple, that we agree the proposed council tax base for the whole area by parish as set out in the report. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kaiser. So, Councillor Housel, as the seconder, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
I reserve my right, sir.
Fine, okay. So, does anyone else wish to speak?
Yes, Councillor Lindsay Ferris here. I have my hand up.
Okay, please start then, Councillor Ferris.
Thank you. Good evening. Within the council tax space, there is a 1% allowance for non-payment. This is the same level of allowance as last year. However, I believe we have had greater pressure on council tax payments this year due to the pandemic. I therefore ask whether a 1% allowance is sufficient to cover any potential losses.
Okay, is that a question? Well, just more of a statement. Is it a question to?
No, it's a question, Mr. Mayor. We have analysed what we're collecting at the moment, and I am assured by the officers that the 1% is adequate.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? I see no other hands on this. So in that case, Councillor John Kaiser again, would you like to have your right of reply before we go to the vote?
No, I think Councillor Housel might like his right to apply.
Yes, sorry, I was reading the wrong way. Yes, Councillor Housel, would you like the right of reply?
There's really not very much to be said on this. It's a factual statement. It's a weighted council tax addition, really, and I just recommend it. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, sorry. That was your right to speak as a seconder. Yes, but back to you again, Councillor Kaiser. Would you like to now have your right to reply, which I gave you prematurely a few moments ago?
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I just accord with what Councillor Housel has just said. It is a factual document. It allows, as I say, the precepts to be set and the council tax to be calculated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So we can now go to the vote. This well-tried practice of hands up and down. Can you make sure all your hands are down, please? Now we're going to do the for vote first. So anyone who wishes to vote for this item, please put your hands up now. Okay, put your hands down now then, please. And we move on to those who may wish to vote against. If you wish to vote against, will you please put your hands up now? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, there appears to be a hand up. Could you just check that's correct?
Yes, I've got, well, there was one hand up. It's gone down and it's gone back up again.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, that was mine. For some reason, it didn't want to go down, but it is down now. It's Councillor Boyd.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, make sure all hands are down. And then we're going on to the abstentions. Anyone who wishes to abstain, please use the hands up feature now. Okay, as usual, just in case your hands aren't able to go up or you have an issue with them, can you let me know if you need to vote verbally on this or not? Please speak if you do. And I believe the recommendations are agreed. Right. Okay, next item, excuse me, is agenda item 82, which is the council tax reduction scheme. Councillor Kaiser, I understand that you are going to propose this report. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. It's John Horsell.
Okay, right. The well-known double act. So, Councillor Kaiser, you can speak for up to 3 minutes now, if you wish.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an annual document that's presented to Council to set the council tax reduction scheme. As I said back in November, I'd be looking to extend the council tax reduction scheme. The extension of the council tax to reduction grant to carers by discounting the carers allowance as part of the income considered when assessing who should receive the allowance, thus meaning more carers will be able to access this financial support. And as you can see in the paper presented here tonight, that commitment has been included. And in addition to the reform of the scheme, which brings greater support for residents, I would also like to commit to extend the exclusion from council tax for care leavers in the borough. As such, I'm happy to announce there will be an additional support for carer leavers, which is included in next year's budget and will take effect from April this year. This means the removal of the financial burden of council tax for these young people making their way in life up to the age of 25. Both are worthwhile benefits for residents who need support and forming part of the borough's council strategy to help eradicate poverty in the borough. This has only been possible due to the successful management and control of the council finances, and as such, I recommend this report to the council tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kaiser. And now, Councillor Halsall, do you, as the seconder, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
I'll reserve my right to speak later, sir.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak on this item? Yes, there are some hands here. Let's have a look. Yes, the first hand up here is Councillor Sarah Kerr. Would you like to speak, Councillor Kerr?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm actually pleased that Councillor Kaiser has mentioned both the two council discount schemes, obviously the disregarding of carers allowances income in council tax reduction assessments and the removal of council tax for care leavers up to the age of 25. I'd firstly like to say how pleased I am that the Liberal Democrat proposal to disregard carers allowance in the award calculation has been taken on board. In the UK, there are 900,000 full-time unpaid carers who rely on carers allowance. They receive just £67.25 a week. It is the lowest benefit of its kind. Many unpaid carers struggle and often rely on food banks to feed themselves and the people they care for. To disregard this small amount of money from the calculation for council tax reduction is the right thing to do, and I'm just surprised that this has been overlooked for so long. It is also timely to raise that nationally the Liberal Democrats are calling on the government to immediately raise carers allowance by £1,000 a year, which is the same as the uplift in universal credit. If you haven't already done so, why not add your name to the campaign? I would also like to raise my concerns over the appalling consultation that this authority undertook on this scheme. To say that the use of language was confusing is an understatement. I was struggling to work out whether I should be ticking the agree or disagree button for a number of questions because they were written in such a convoluted way. But what angered me the most was the question asking whether child maintenance and child benefit should be disregarded. Child maintenance and child benefit are two completely different things, and it's highly possible that respondents will have different views on how they should be viewed in the context of the scheme. As such, it is disappointing that I have to remind this council that consultations must be sufficiently clear so that those consulted can understand what they are being consulted on and be able to give a meaningful response, because in the case of this consultation, that was not the case. The final point I'd like to make is on the second of Councillor Kaiser's pledges, which is the council tax exemption for care leavers being extended to the age of 25. The council's stated priorities affirmed its commitment to providing the right support and environment for all children and young people in the borough to thrive, recognising that the circumstances for some will mean that additional support is needed. Our care leavers are some of the most vulnerable young people in the borough, and it is our privilege to support and protect them. It is thanks to my Liberal Democrat colleague, Councillor Prue Bray, who requested quite some time ago now at a corporate parenting board meeting that council tax exemption for care leavers was extended up to the age of 25. And the corporate parenting board did vote unanimously for this action to be taken. Subsequently, Councillor Rachel Burgess has made repeated calls for this to be implemented. And I understand this has actually now been included as part of the medium-term financial plan for the next financial year, and it is welcomed. It is just such a shame that this couldn't have been enacted sooner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. The next hand raised is Councillor Burgess. Rachel Burgess, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While, of course, I welcome the removal of carers allowance from the scheme, it's worth remembering that the Labour group raised this very issue 2 years ago and the Conservatives did nothing. For years, carers have been unfairly penalised, and it's astonishing that it's taken a global pandemic for the Conservatives to wake up to the value of our carers. And let's not forget that the proposal set before us 2 years ago initially included child maintenance income, a fact to which the Executive appeared ambivalent at the time. It was only pressure from this group and the public that caused them to U-turn on this shortly afterwards. Look at the feedback from this consultation this year and you'll see there's no clamour for the scheme to be cut back, arguably quite the opposite. All vulnerable groups receive high percentages of support in the consultation. So I am left puzzled. If the Executive really wanted to listen to people and they really do care about the vulnerable people in our borough, why did only one of the 7 changes to the scheme that were considered actually propose an increase in the level of support? One option was do nothing, all the other options considered were cuts. At a recent scrutiny meeting, there were repeated statements from Councillor Kaiser that the scheme is demand-led. Yes, once the rules are set, the Executive have committed to providing the support to anyone who is eligible. In that sense, the funds required are indeed demand-led. But don't let that fool you. This paper is about setting the rules for the scheme. It's crystal clear the Conservatives have changed the rules of this scheme many times since 2013 so that many fewer people will benefit. Just 2 years ago, just as one example, the Conservatives reduced the savings level that recipients are allowed to have from £16,000 to £4,000. By anyone's measure, a massive drop, thus ensuring it would help even fewer people. The fact remains that the funding for this scheme has been reduced year on year since 2013 because of ongoing austerity. Between 13-14 and 2019-20, almost £900,000 less has been spent on the scheme. Crucially, that means over 1,300 fewer people are helped by the scheme now than back in 12-13, the last year of the council tax benefit. Basically, whatever the fanfare around this positive change put forward tonight, this Conservative council continue to penalise vulnerable people as a result of years and years of their own damaging austerity ideology. There are a number of levers that could be pulled if there really was a will there to increase the number of people eligible and the amount that they are helped. Why not consider allowing backdating of claims or changing the level of reduction applied due to other adults in the household or raising the minimum amount of award? None of these were considered. The change tonight, while it is welcome, will cost an additional £6,000. That's a rise of less than 0.2 of 1%. With COVID and with the proposed Conservative cuts to universal credits ahead, more and more people will be left behind. Protection of these people and their families should be at the heart of our response. In the current climate, a meagre increase after years of cutbacks is quite frankly insulting. It's not good enough, and that's why we in the Labour Group cannot support this scheme as it stands. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Burgess. The next person to speak is Councillor Pauline Hellyer-Simons, please.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to read out a prepared speech, but I did want to say how very much I welcome the fact that the council tax has been taken away for children leaving care until the age of 25. They have an enormous problem in adjusting to the adult world, and finances are one of the most difficult things for them. I wasn't going to mention a political party until Rachel Burgess did, but I would like to say that I can beat her. The Conservatives raised this issue some 3 years ago or more, possibly, when I was chairman of the Children's Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And at that time, there wasn't the money to do it, although we were beginning to look at it. But now, because of incredibly careful financial management by John Kaiser, ably and supported by John Horsall, our finances are in an incredibly healthy state. And that's why we have now been able to do it. But please don't claim credit for something that was already a Conservative idea.
Thank you, Councillor Hellyer-Simons. The next hand up is Councillor Andy Croy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to, I'll keep this very, very brief. I was a little bit disappointed that John has introduced the separate issue of exemptions for care leavers up to the age of 25. Although it's an important issue, and those changes are welcome, if late, that is not the issue we're voting on tonight. In terms of the current consultation, it's a shame that the report didn't mention the very large public response. I think there were over 500 responses, and as I think Rachel has said, the majority of these responses were very positive about the scheme, and it is a shame that the positive support that the public express when we ask them, when we go to ask them and they express support for a scheme, it is up to us and it's up to officers to actually give them a scheme which reflects their positive feelings about the scheme. In terms of the history of the scheme, a lot of the decisions relating to the scheme were taken actually by executive special council committees. And the most horrific of these was back in 2013, when £500,000 of benefits payable to people in trouble was cut by the Conservatives, and that cutting continued, salami slicing year after year, 2016, 2017, 2019, with the Tories kept cutting. So if we're going to have a history lesson, let's have all of the history. Thank you very much.
Malcolm, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yes, next person is Councillor Emma Hobbs, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to support everything that my fellow colleague Pauline has said, as I was on her committee. And I would like to just point out that although we are receiving this defamation from the Labour Party, the reason we could not afford it was because the Labour Party almost bankrupted this country, and it has taken us years and years and years to get out of this. That included less money going towards our poor councils.
Thank you. And now we have Councillor Prue Bray, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't planning to speak, but I think I need to. This has been going on for several years. I did initially raise it. It was taken up again by Children's Overview and Scrutiny under the Conservatives. However, they didn't implement it. And despite the fact that the Corporate Parenting Board had been voting for it and voted for it last year, it wasn't brought in last year. And it was very strange that some members of the Corporate Parenting Board one night voted for it to happen, and then the next night, when it was looked at by everyone scrutiny, they didn't support it. So clearly something had happened in between those two things. I am very glad to see that care leavers will get this exemption now. I'm also glad to see the carers allowance disregarded. There is a lot more we could do, but at least the scheme has got a little bit better this year. So let's not over-congratulate ourselves, but let's be glad that something positive is happening and it's going in the right direction.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. And now we have Councillor Chris Bowring, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I propose that when we come to the vote, that is a recorded vote? I believe I have several of my colleagues who support me in that proposal.
Okay. Since I've got some more hands again now. Next one then is Councillor Guy Grandison.
Chair, I was just agreeing with Councillor Bowring in supporting a recorded vote.
We need 6.
Okay, so we need 6 of them. So can you make sure that if you are in favour of a recorded vote, put your hands up now? Yes, there's more. So it can be a recorded vote. However, before we go to that vote, the Councillor, where we are, Councillor Halsall, would you like, as seconder, to speak now as a right a reply?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. At a time of national emergency, I'm pleased to second this motion to help those on lower incomes. It is only this Conservative controlled council who can manage finances prudently and at the same time support our residents. It is shameful that the opposition focus on our gross debt of 700 million, which they say they would reduce. But why our net debt is below 100 million and our asset cover is more than 10 times. It is like selling a house worth 100k to remove a mortgage of 10 and finding yourself homeless. It is financial illiteracy, only possible by the opposition. Our investments, including the town centre, are contributing massively to our services, ensuring that the lowest funded unitary is providing the very, very best services. Our borrowing costs, which are fixed, are more than covered by income generation from attributable investment. Our investment strategy already precludes investment out of the borough, and within the borough, it is designed to ensure a social purpose. We have secured the heart of both Twyford and Woodley with strong blue chip returns so that we can be influential in the development of these towns and their future regeneration. The opposition keeps announcing that they will do things which are already being done. But what do you expect? Remember when last the Lib Dems managed the council's finances, the council went broke. And if that is a long time ago, more recently, the same party ran up debt and the precept of Woodley to avoid going bust.
I would ask Mr. Mayor, may I ask if Mr. Halsall will give way momentarily? I was just wondering, John, what this had got to do with the proposal.
No, I won't give way, Mr. Mayor. I would ask what services the opposition are going to
point of order, please.
Request for gross debt, the council reduction scheme.
Can I make a point of order?
Point of order. Who's speaking?
Delighted to support this measure again, illustrating the finance of the council and welcoming of our residents.
Order, please.
Plans. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Despite Councillor Boren, are you the one making point of order?
Yes, I am. I thought it was quite disgusting there that you just ignored me. He knew full well what was going on. He ignored me like a standards rule. Unbelievable. I was going to make a point of order at the point that you're supposed to speak to the motion or to the recommendation, and nearly 70% of that speech had nothing to do with it. And we must keep that clear. When he wants to talk about time wasting, there we go.
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
Would you
Mayor,
like to resume then, Councillor Castle? No?
I'm fine. I'd like to respond to that because Mr. Doran and his colleagues consistently and constantly
Councillor, please.
National issues which have got nothing to do with the Borough Council.
Okay, thank you. So finally then we have Councillor Kaiser. Would you now like to have the right of reply before we go to the vote?
Yes, thank you very much. I must admit, I'm absolutely stunned. Here we are trying to help the most vulnerable in the borough, and all I hear from people is it should have been so. Well, it should have been so. No doubt it did. But at some point, you have to look at how much money you've got and how you spend that money wisely. A broke council is no good to anybody. And I dare the Labour Party, I dare them to vote against this. This is savings for the most vulnerable in the borough. You can abstain and you can vote against it. I would really like to see that. I dare you to do that. That's all I got to say, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kaiser. So we can now go to the vote on the recommendations as set out in the report. Once again, we will be using the hands up and down. Sorry, just a moment. No, it's a recorded vote, sorry. Yes, it's a recorded vote, in which case we need to go across to the Chief Executive Officer, Susan, to do that.
Mayor.
Thank you.
So I'll read out the names, and if you can say for, against, or abstention. So Keith Baker.
Abstain.
Harry Bath.
For.
Rachel Bishop-Firth.
For.
Laura Blumenthal.
For.
Chris Bowery.
For.
Shirley Boyd.
Abstain.
Amazing.
Abstain.
Ray.
On the fence.
For.
Rachel Burgess.
Abstain. It's just not good enough, Councillor Kaiser.
Jenny Cheng.
I think it's disgraceful you're voting against giving money or abstaining.
Sorry,
to give,
sorry, no conversations. It just votes for, against, or abstain. Please, one voice at a time. We one vote at a time. Thank you. Please continue.
Ulrika Clark.
For.
Stephen Conway.
For.
Gary Cowan.
For.
Andy Croy.
Abstain.
Shame.
Richard Delinsky.
For.
Cole Duran.
Surprise, surprise.
Didn't hear that. Cole Duran.
Oh, I'm sorry, somebody was talking over me. I'm abstaining.
Lindsay Ferris.
For.
Michael Firmager.
For.
Paul Fishwick.
For.
Jim Pruin.
For.
Maria G.
For.
Guy Granderson.
For, Susan, just quickly, did we miss Gary or did my audio cut out?
We didn't miss Gary.
Apologies, my audio cut out.
Charlotte Haytham Taylor.
For.
John Halsall.
For.
David Hare.
For.
Pauline Helly Simons.
For.
Emma Hobbs.
For.
Graham Howe.
For.
Clive Jones.
For.
John Kaiser.
Very much for.
Sarah Kerr.
For.
Diane King.
For.
Abdul Loys.
For.
Tahir Maher.
For.
Charles Baguettes.
For.
Adrian Mather.
For.
Ken Marr.
For.
Andrew Mickleborough.
For.
Stuart Monroe.
For.
Gregor Murray.
For.
Barry Patman.
For.
Malcolm Richards.
As Mayor, I abstain.
Angus Ross.
For.
Daniel Sargent.
For.
Imogen Shepherd-Debay.
For.
Rochelle Shepherd-Debay.
For.
Caroline Smith.
For.
Chris Smith.
For.
Wayne Smith.
For.
Bill Soane.
For.
Alison Swaddle.
For.
Simon Weeks.
For.
Right, now we have the results. The recommendation is agreed. Thank you, councillors. We now advance to agenda item 83, which is the timetable of meetings. Here Here again, Councillor Halsall, I understand you're going to propose this report. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And seconded by John Kaiser.
Okay, Halsall, Kaiser. Right. Councillor Halsall, then, as the proposer, you can speak now for up to 3 minutes, if you wish.
Mr. Mayor, I'm very pleased to propose the timetable of meetings for 21-22, which has been prepared by our very competent and committed officers. During the first wave of the pandemic, WCBC suspended meetings at the last possible moment and restarted all meetings as soon as possible. Whilst not always ideal, meetings are happening through Teams bandwidth permitting, with members being ejected for reasons unknown. We are very proud that local democracy and transparency were impaired for the shortest time possible. During that period, briefing meetings were held for all the group leaders so that all members could be informed and influence what we have been doing, what decisions have been taken, and the received knowledge of the situation. These leaders' meetings have been continued whenever the pandemic has been at its worst. Nothing has been done covertly, nor have we shied away from difficult decisions because of imperfect information. For the last 2 years, the budget has been taken through overview and scrutiny as it has been prepared, allowing opposition to have an insight into coming decisions and the appropriate meetings added in order to do so. We have been invited members of the opposition at the executive and deputy chair of an important committee. I'm a Democrat. I believe that the English adversarial system of an executive opposition free press, if operated properly, will give rise to the optimal decision making, which is transparent and open. For it to work, there have to be meetings, and not only the ruling party has to perform its role, but also the opposition and the press, teasing out issues with decisions made or to be made worse as well. Abuse delivered from housebound iPads only creates noise. Disingenuous and disruptive behaviour puts the council in disrepute and diminishes us all, however much fun it appears at the time. It is vitally important at this time of national crisis, when residents are dying from this terrible virus, that the public has confidence in the council, its officers and councillors. This is not the only responsibility of the ruling group, but also the opposition and the press. Criticism of our staff who cannot reply demoralises them, but does nothing to improve service delivery. Constructive criticism in the appropriate meeting of a service which we provide allows us to capture that concern and improve. We have no purpose other than to serve our residents by providing the best services we can for them. So please, let's have a well-informed, constructive debate in the correct meeting and use our time wisely. Members will note that the timetable includes a full panoply of meetings which allow for full participation of all members of this council and hopefully for better decisions. We anticipate that during the currency of this timetable, we will restart physical meetings, but not necessarily all meetings. They could be hybrid or in some cases continue with virtual meetings where it works. I propose the acceptance of the timetable.
Thank you, Councillor Halsall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Kaiser, as the secretary, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
No, I would like to speak now, Mr. Mayor, if possible.
Please do
so. Mr. Mayor, I would just like to say I fully support the leader. And I too am a Democrat, but nothing I do is above my commitment to residents of the borough. And the channeling of support needed to residents in these dark, uncertain times, and to continue for people to continuously look for secrecy and deceit in every mistake made by officers or members undermines and devalues all the things we try to do for residents as a council, which is to provide and support and services. There are councils.
What has that got to do with a timetable?
There are councils.
Order.
Point
of order.
One person at a time, please.
I'm moving on to, Mr. Mayor, I'm moving on to how it affects our council meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are councils who for operational reasons have not got back to holding the number of meetings we have. There are councils which do not invite opposition to take roles in the managing of these meetings. We do. There are councils which do not think the opposition needs briefing or put their budget through scrutiny. We are not one of those councils. I would suggest those among us who feel there is a problem step up to the plate and come to these meetings, take part, become part of the solution. At no doubt your input will be valuable and will be welcome. At some point we will be fighting an election and all that brings, but at this moment in time I'm fully committed to supporting residents, fighting the pandemic and giving the community all the help we possibly can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kaiser. So does anyone else wish to speak now? If you do, please raise your hand. Right, we have a few hands up, and the first person at the top of the list is Clive. I assume that's Clive Jones. Would like to speak, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, as you will know only too well, there have been a number of full council meetings in the last year that have been somewhat fractious. The main reason for this is there hasn't been enough time to get through the council's business. Sadly, the Conservative ruling group on too many occasions have stifled debate and not agreed to an extension of time from 10:30 to 11:30. No doubt they are planning to do the same this evening. Motions that have been delayed have included one committing the council to planting 250,000 trees, another motion committing the council to supporting free school meals during school holidays, and a motion considering the desirability of a third runway at Heathrow Airport. Liberal Democrats believe that councillors have a right to bring motions to the council and that there has to be an opportunity for these motions to be debated. Therefore, should the Liberal Democrats be given the opportunity to be put in charge of this council by our residents on May the 6th, we will add at least one full council meeting to this timetable of meetings. This will enable there to be a more democratic debate, more opportunities for councillors to hold the executive to account through questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. The next person is Councillor Grandison, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regards to this timetable, first of all, I just want to thank officers for the support that we had in the past year, given the changes that we have done. I would also like to thank officers for the opportunity, speaking as the chairman of the current Corporate and Overview Scrutiny Committee, who has just completed its initial pass-through of the budget before it comes to this council next month. I have become known as Mr. Extraordinary Meeting as a result. What we have done with Community and Corporate in looking at this calendar is we have increased the number of meetings to decrease the amount of extraordinary meetings that we were having to hold. The overview and scrutiny panels of this council are the most important part of this council's business, where we basically overview, scrutinize, and do the true analysis of this council's business. This council chamber in the full council meeting is effectively where we approve of those decisions together with the executive programme. It is the Overview and Scrutiny Committee that also holds the executive to account in its truest form. And it is those meetings that I feel are the most important on this council. And I'm very pleased that officers have been able to accommodate my committee's request to increase the number of those meetings. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I will support this timetable.
Thank you, Councillor Granson. The next councillor to speak will be Councillor Gary Cowan, please.
Yes, thank you very much for that. I suppose the John and John show again. You made the point earlier. I would support it. I was really only going to say that every year we always have a very similar debate, and one point that's always raised is we need one extra council meeting because we end up having to have an extra one anyway. So it would make more sense to put it in the timetable. Guy Grandison made some very good points there. By picking up on all the various extra meetings that need to be picked up to get through the business. Now, council is a classic example. If one wants to look back at the council meetings over the years, you will see many, many times where we never ever complete the business. And the people who suffer if we fail to complete the business is the residents. So it's a very simple request that one extra council meeting, but we really need to go away and look at how we do business, because we certainly do not do business that's in the interests of our residents. I will support it, and I do thank the officers for doing an excellent job in producing this schedule every year. But we do need extra council meetings so we can finish the business in the interests of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, the next person on the list is Councillor Andy Croy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to speak on this, but I'm a little bit puzzled as to what John Kaiser was talking about. He's talking about, he seems to say he was inviting opposition members to help him, or to help the ruling group do their job. Was that what he said? No one's asked me, so I haven't been able to turn anything down. I've been to, I think, every meeting I've been asked to attend. I've been to more than those that I've been asked to attend, including the extra ones, the extra recovery meetings that have been put on by various officers. So I don't know, is he describing an invitation that he's made to the Liberal Democrats and they're not playing? Because no invitation has come to the real opposition, but of course...
No, there hasn't been one for us, Andy, there hasn't.
Okay, well, I was, but of course I'm happy to talk to John about anything we can do to help.
Thank you. Next person on the list is Councillor Alison Swaddle, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just going back to the argument about the need to extend meetings, I just felt I wanted to remind us all that it was the Conservatives that proposed that we begin at 7 o'clock. We used to begin at 7:30, plan to go till 10:30, and we now start at 7 o'clock because we've added 40 minutes onto this meeting, which I thoroughly approve of. And we should be able to get through our business by 10:30 if we don't have time wasting. So I do support the motion for this timetable for 21-22. Thank you.
Right, thank you. The next person to speak is Councillor Jim Fruin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't be mentioning any party political names or anything else like that. Just a sensible suggestion, I think, that came out earlier of having an extra meeting, a full council meeting. A number of council meetings that I've been to as a new councillor where we haven't completed business is actually quite surprising. In a work scenario, a business scenario, that wouldn't be allowed. I don't think we should continue doing that as a council. If I read the timetable correctly, and I think it's an excellent piece of work, we have no meeting in June or October. Perhaps one of those slots could be used for an extra meeting so we can get through the meeting. All business needed. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no more hands up. So according to my sequence here, yeah, Councillor Kaiser, would you like to speak to round up your bit before Councillor Halsall has a right to reply? Oh, I've just realised you spoke earlier. So yes, in that case, we move straight on to Councillor Halsall. Would you like to have your right to reply, please, for up to 3 minutes? Sorry, I didn't tick that you'd spoken.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very kind. I would also like to remind the council that we have done everything we possibly can to get through the business of the council meeting, but council meetings can't be elastic. They need to end at a certain time. We've brought forward the meeting to 7, as Councillor Swaddle pointed out. We've also deleted items from the council meeting, and we've suggested others. But I think that however many council meetings we had, they would be full up with business we wouldn't get through because councillors would fill them up. So may I propose the timetable as prepared, and may we come to the vote, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. That's exactly what I intend to do now. We're going to the vote on the recommendation as set out on the agenda front sheet. Voting will be undertaken using the hands up facility that we all know and love. So can we make sure that all the hands are down to start with? And now the first vote will be those who wish to vote for. So if you wish to vote for this item, would you please put the hands up now? Okay, so could you take your hands down? Everybody's hands down, please. They're going down gradually, not all yet. Yes, now they're all down. So we now move on to the those who want to vote against. If you wish to vote against this item, please use the hands up feature now. Okay, so hands down, please. It did look like so many anyway, but hands down. And now we'll hand anyone who wishes to abstain. Please vote now if you wish to abstain on this item. Okay, put your hands down. And the recommendations are agreed. Thank you, everybody, for that item. Timetable of meetings is approved. We now move on, excuse me, agenda item 84, which is member question time, for which we have a maximum of 30 minutes. Supplementaries will be allowed. Can I remind you again that that you ask your question as quickly and clearly as you can. Executive members, the answers, responses to questions must be no longer than 2 minutes, and supplementary questions must be no longer than 1, and these will be timed. So on that basis, I now move on to Councillor Sarah Kerr to ask her question of Councillor Gregor Murray, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What action has been taken so far with regards to implementing PM 2.5 monitoring across the borough following the air pollution motion that this council passed last year?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Kerr. I'm very pleased to say that since passing this motion, the council has been successful in securing funding from DEFRA to pay for an eco-travel officer whose responsibilities will include promoting sustainable transport, reducing NO2 levels, improving air quality, and continuing our proactive work in developing action plans for our air quality management areas. The council is also preparing to roll out its plan for non-idling zones across the borough. You may have already seen the results of the schools poster competition, which are currently being positioned in the highest affected areas of our road network. Since passing the PM 2.5 motion, we have been working to understand how better to monitor levels of particulate matter across the borough. We believe that reference equivalent monitors are the best solution to ongoing monitoring. It is our intention to install these in our air quality management areas in Peach Street and the Twyford Crossroads. We're also considering where additional indicative monitors should be installed in other areas of the boroughs. Likely areas would be around the air quality management areas and in other areas where the DEFRA predicted maps indicate PM 2.5 levels could be highest. A bid has been submitted through the 21-22 MTFP programme to fund this monitoring equipment. In addition to this, you should also be aware the council is currently rolling out technology upgrades through its Highways ITS project to deliver intelligent signalisation that can both reduce congestion and improve air quality. And finally, I'm pleased to confirm our involvement in the University of Reading-led Adept Live Lab programme that will see the adoption of digital technologies across Berkshire Highways network. 30 additional air pollution sensors are being installed by the University of Reading to monitor how smarter traffic management could improve air quality. The results of this should also help create a dynamic public health tool that will enable us and our neighbouring authorities to make better traffic management decisions and air pollution interventions. I believe that this is a significant level of progress in the short time period since the motion was passed.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr, do you have a supplementary question, a brief supplementary?
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Councillor Murray. I mean, I was specifically asking about the PM 2.5 monitors. There was a lot of additional stuff there. And just to confirm, there's actually 3 air quality management areas. There's one around the M4 as well. My supplementary is, can you confirm that once the monitoring starts, should levels of PM 2.5 at any place in the borough be in excess of the World Health Organization recommended maximum level of 10 micrograms per cubic metre, urgent action will be taken to reduce it to below that level? It's
a really great question, Sarah. To be honest, we haven't discussed yet local air pollution targets. Personally, I want to see and understand what the situation with PM 2.5 and other air pollutants are across the borough so that we can take action in the highest zones that we have. We need to set local air quality targets. I completely agree with you on that, but what those should be at the moment, we haven't discussed. I'm open to a conversation in terms of what those should be and how we progress towards much more stringent targets locally.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. So we move on to Councillor Pauline Hellier-Simons to ask a question of Councillor Parry Barr.
Thank you. Question is to the Executive Member for Environment and Leisure. We've heard a lot on social media and in the newspapers about your proposed waterproof green recycling bags to keep our paper and card dry. Please can you explain in plain English how and when you propose to deliver these bags to residents so that they can start using them to help increase our recycling rates?
Thank you, Pauline. The plan is that the new recycling bags to keep paper and card dry to maximise recycling and reduce costs will be delivered to residents with the annual blue bags delivery in February and March of this year. This will be accompanied by a communication campaign to help residents to use the bags as soon as they receive them. The recycling bags have been manufactured abroad within the timescales, but there are international shipping challenges because the bags are coming all the way from Vietnam, being experienced due to COVID and Brexit. The council's office team is working very hard to ensure that the bags are shipped so that these timescales can be met.
Thank you, Councillor Barr. Councillor Hellier-Simons, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, and thank you for that, Parry, but my supplementary is also about waste. There have been a number of reports about the roadside litter bins overflowing with litter. Can you please clarify what's been done to resolve that?
Well, thank you, Pauline. Because our residents are working from home and a lot of people are at home and they are taking walking exercises, the roadside bins have been overfilling. We have made additional plans with John Kaiser's blessings to make extra funds available to increase the frequency of bins emptying to keep our environment and the borough clear of litter.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we now move on to Councillor Graham Howe to ask his question of Councillor Gregor Murray, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question is, Reading have a community energy fund which allows charities and others to apply for grant funding to pay for solar panel installation and other green energy initiatives. This is money that's raised from local investors. Is Woking Borough Council planning to launch such a similar scheme?
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Mr. Mayor, I'm very pleased to say that a paper covering the creation of a Woking Community Energy Fund will be voted on by the Executive during its meeting next week. The Community Energy Fund is not a new concept. The Reading Fund was founded in 2016, and other places that have them already include Sheffield, the City of London, Lincoln, Bristol, Islington, Oxford and Tees Valley. Community energy funds serve multiple purposes. They increase the generation of renewable energy, enable sites that otherwise might not be able to afford or might not be of interest to large commercial backers to generate low-cost energy on site, and also create funds to improve communities, all underpinned by community ownership and community decision-making. The funds we are proposing would be backed by an organisation called Energy for All and initially supported by Reading Community Energy. Energy for All have been operating similar schemes since 2002, currently do so for 28 different councils and other organisations around the country. Energy for All are regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority and will organise and facilitate the community share offers, which are used to then fund the different initiatives and installations as well as their upkeep. Any profits made from the sale of energy, either to the national grid or to the building operator, are then either paid as a dividend to investors or ring-fenced and used to support sustainability efforts within communities. In recent years, this dividend has been typically between 4 and 4.5% annually. The scheme will help us reduce carbon emissions. It will help us take control of our energy generation, storage and distribution, enable energy generation where currently there is none, and potentially provide a low-cost energy source to some community and charity organisations. And it's a great opportunity to engage our community as well. So I look forward to the executive voting on it next week, and I hope it will pass.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Howe, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I think it's a quick one, Mr. Mayor. What types of buildings would Councillor Murray think are most appropriate for the funding to be used from a community energy fund?
Thank you. Well, evidence from Reading suggests that installations typically are valued somewhere between £200 and £5,000. So, yeah, it's mostly going to be small PV installations, although there are opportunities to go to larger alternative energy projects as well. But as a result of that, it's most likely to be, as you say, community and charities that will come forward. So charity offices, potentially churches, libraries, youth clubs, activity centres. I'd love for the local scout troops and guide troops and everything else to come forward and get solar panels put onto their buildings as well. It'll help them reduce some of their costs. It's also a great opportunity for some of our town and parish councils to add some solar PV to some of their own buildings. And I know Woodley Town Council have already done that with a few of their buildings as well. So I think it's a great opportunity for a load of different organisations across our borough, and I look forward to seeing those bids come in.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Now move on to Councillor Laura Blumenthal. Would you like to ask your question, please, of Councillor O'Lickering Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Please can you let us know what is Woking Borough Council doing to support schools at this very difficult time?
Yes, thank you for your question. Since the start of the pandemic, the Council has provided continuous support to schools and settings via daily email briefings to head teachers with information and guidance. We also have weekly leadership roundtable for all head teachers, and we have 3 roundtable sessions per week for key staff, looking at things like remote education, managing assessments, etc. And in the spring, we are going to look at mental health. We also have a COVID task group monitoring the impact of COVID. The school improvement team and the educational psychology team have worked in partnership to deliver the Department of Education Wellbeing for Education Return Programme, which is a series of workshops and practical materials to support the emotional and mental health and well-being of pupils and staff. Since January, we also have extraordinary roundtable meetings to address the setup of flow testing, looking at Section 44, health and safety at work letters, staffing, risk assessments, and similar things. So all in all, we are in constant touch with our schools, and we know what is going on, and we exchange views, and they give us intelligence on what is going on.
Thank you very much. Do you have a brief supplementary, Councillor Blumenthal?
Thank you. It's great news that mental health will be a key focus going forward. I have no further questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank
you very much. Okay, in that case, we move on to Councillor Rochelle Shepherd-Dubay to ask your question of Councillor Jorgensen, though I suspect in her absence it will also go to Councillor Halsall. But please ask your question here. Hello? Councillor Shepherd-Dubay? Rochelle Shepherd-Dubay?
Yes. What is the result of the new traffic modeling on the Winnish Relief Roundabout, since there is now nearly triple the proposed number of houses and traffic on Woodward Close, not including the SEND school, since all the design and modeling on the roundabout was based only on the existing houses?
Okay.
Good evening, Rochelle. How are you?
Okay.
Lovely. It is noted that this question has been asked during the September 2020 council meeting. At this moment in time, the past answer remains unchanged, which stated, the consultation draft of the local plan update, February 2020, proposes the allocation of land at Winnish Farm for around 250 new homes. The proposed number of new homes was adjusted downwards to account for a potential new SEND school and the traffic it would create. Responses to the draft local plan are currently being reviewed and analysed. As part of the preparation of that draft local plan, a supporting transport assessment was produced and is available on the council's website. The assessment looked at all the junctions across the borough and how they would be impacted under various development scenarios. The assessment considered both the new homes and the delivery of a SEND school at Winnish Farms. The assessment shows that the Woodward Close junction would operate at a level below which its capacity is considered to become a concern. However, as with all the proposed development sites in the draft local plan update, the impact and sustainability of any development will be further considered as the local plan update progresses. More detailed assessment would also be required as part of the process for determining any subsequent planning application. This would include using specific junction software being used.
Thank you, Councillor Halsall.
Just a second, though. There's 350 homes proposed there. There's 250 homes proposed in the Taylor Wimpey, and there's 100 homes proposed around the SEND school. So there's actually an additional amount of houses. There's 350 extra houses in the conservative local plan update, which the Liberal Democrats did not get a chance to actually vote on, nor did the Labour, nor did the Independent, only the Conservative Party.
Councillor Shepherd-Dubay, it's supposed to be at the end of the question. I'm supposed to ask if you want a supplementary.
Okay.
So you've already used your time for supplementary, but would you like to stick a question on the end, a brief question, rather than statements, please?
Okay, there are 350 houses there, not 250. So what are you planning to do about the extra 100 houses worth of traffic? Since we haven't, no one seems to have a copy of traffic modeling. I've asked for it several times and it's never been available.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Halsall.
I think I've replied to that, Rochelle, but I'm very happy to help you navigate to the traffic survey, which is on the website.
Traffic modeling I asked for, not the survey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now the other Shepherd-Dubay, Imogen Shepherd-Dubay, Councillor Imogen. Can you ask your question, please, of, again, Pauline Jorgensen, which will almost certainly divert to Councillor Halsall again.
Hi there. I guess she's away, yes. I'm still being questioned by residents in my ward about the accessibility to buses on Broad Street in Wokingham. For many, even during COVID, using the buses is their only choice of the main form of transport. However, Broad Street is one of the few areas of Wokingham Borough where there are no raised curbs, despite it being one of the busiest places for bus use, which means that some people can no longer access the town independently. You would think, with all the work that's been going on in Wokingham, that there would be some funding to make this more accessible to all. So my question is, when are we going to see a commitment to supporting people with different abilities to get the raised curbs that we desperately need?
Imogen, it's always a delight to see you.
Hello.
Providing enhanced bus stops in this location is not a simple, quick or cheap solution due to the topography of the area. There are complex constraints which prevent such enhancements being added to existing bus stop facilities without much wider works on Broad Street itself. Because the existing pavements here are very low and flat, installation of castle curbs in this location would result in a ramped pavement, itself an accessibility issue, which would lead in turn to water draining from the pavements towards the properties rather than the gutter. Consequently, we will pick up this requirement as we progress future phases of town centre regeneration project, which includes this section of Broad Street, as outlined in the Wokingham Public Realm Design and Delivery Strategy, July 2013. However, the absence of raised curbs does not preclude people with mobility issues from accessing public transport in Broad Street. Local bus companies whose buses serve the Broad Street bus stops have policies that state that the ramp, which all of their buses are fitted with, should be deployed upon request. The ramp deployment is not just for wheelchair users. Local bus companies expect their drivers to offer assistance to anyone who requires it. If for any reason a driver does not deploy the ramp on request, this should be reported directly to the bus company so the incident can be referred to the driver's manager.
Thank you. Would you like Imogen to have a brief supplementary question?
Sure. I can assure you that they're not deploying their ramps only for wheelchair users. Quite simply, is that are we going to get a commitment to when we are likely to see this area improved? Obviously, it's been talked about for a while. I understand the problems, but we either need to move the buses to another location, which can be improved, but there are certainly people who cannot get on and off the buses easily, and the buses won't kneel low enough for them for the curbs, because the curbs are really very low. Surely there's something that could be done more readily.
I'd happily sponsor a conversation between the officers, yourself, and the executive member for highways when she's back in train.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Councillor Elson. Thank you.
Thank you.
We move on now to Councillor Caroline Smith, please, to ask your question of Councillor Charles Margetts.
Thank you. Good evening. During the first lockdown, the residents of Wokingham volunteered to help provide food and services to the vulnerable across the whole of Wokingham Borough. And I would like to add my thanks to all the volunteers for their help. So what did Wokingham Borough Council do when the first lockdown finished in June 2020 to continue to encourage support and possibly increase the numbers of registered volunteers, so that when there was another lockdown occurred as now, they are ready to go into immediate action to once again help the vulnerable in Wokingham? Thank you.
Thank you. In the first lockdown, a voluntary and community sector action group was established, which initially met 3 times a week and now has continued since, and now meets twice a week with good attendance. This is led by a senior officer by WBC and consists of all the leaders of the key voluntary groups across the borough, such as the CAB, the Link, Working Volunteer Centre and various others. One of the products of this was One Front Door, which has provided a single route for support and has been very, very successful since March 2020. This was never stood down and will continue as long as required. In the first lockdown, lots of unofficial local COVID groups also sprung up. With VCS coordination, the charity involved supported their development, and we now have 11 COVID groups working within the borough and accepting referrals. As the lockdown eased, the majority of these groups stood by to support residents across the borough. The Friendship Alliance, which is a VCS Wokingham Borough initiative to combat loneliness and isolation, took on the role of maintaining communication. And the Friendship Alliance has also supported a couple of new groups to ensure the whole borough is covered. The key task which you referred to is to ensure that we have sufficient volunteers to support the response to COVID. The Wokingham Volunteer Centre, which is a key part of the group, operates as the main contact and recruiting point for volunteering. They respond to support requirements and needs for volunteers and react as the need changes. For instance, we needed more befrienders, welfare callers, and they ran an event, Volunteer Week, to attract more. At the time of writing, we have always had more than enough volunteers to cover the needs of the community and the services we wish to run. In recent times, the need for volunteers has widened to provide support for the vaccination programme, which has been led by the Wokingham Volunteer Centre. The activities of some parts of the VCS have been stepped up over the winter. The approach has been proportionate, and we've always tried to react and support the changing need. And as I said, we've always had more than enough volunteers to cover the services we need.
Right. Thank you for that. Do you have a brief supplementary at all, Karen?
Yeah, it's just I presume we still. Oh yeah, I was going to say we plan making sure we have all these in operation. We're not going to get any of them to slide.
No, I mean, I can assure you we're fully committed to seeing this through. One of the senior members of the adult services team leads this group, and he reports directly into the director. We need the voluntary sector because the bottom line is the council can't take on many of the tasks that the voluntary sector does. And also the voluntary sector is better at some of them than the council would be. The vaccination call for volunteers has been the latest example of this and has generated nearly 500 volunteers in a very short period of time, which is more than enough, basically, to cover the need. And we're committed to going forwards, you know, when this is all over, which it will be someday, to learning the lessons from this, learning the good parts of this, and incorporating them into our thinking going forwards.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to Councillor Rachel Burgess, please, to ask your question of Councillor John Kaiser.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Exempting care leavers from council tax up to the age of 25 was raised at a meeting of the Corporate Parenting Board as far back as October 2019. Why hasn't this change been introduced yet?
Thank you. You've heard my reply tonight. It's in the medium-term budget, so it will be done. Give you a little bit of a background, though. In 2019, it was something that I would have liked to have done at that point. We were facing a £2 million overspend in children's services that we had to fund, and we had to fund that from reserves. And I did not believe at that time it was prudent for us to do that. This year, children's services have got themselves in a lot better shape. And this year, they've coming in with a very, very good performance on budget. So I believe now is the time to introduce it. Like all these things, poverty and vulnerable people, they do need support. And I will do everything that I possibly can to support these people, but I won't put the financial aspects of the council at risk.
Thank you, Councillor Kaiser. Do you have a brief supplementary, Councillor Burgess?
I do, thank you. Yeah, thank you for your answer, Councillor Kaiser, but I'm a bit nonplussed by it. I know that, you know, Councillor Clark, who's the lead member for Children's Services, was at that meeting back in 2019 of Corporate Parenting Board, as were other members of the executive. And I appreciate, you know, that there were problems apparently with the Children's Services finances. Obviously, I understand that, but I also know that the amounts involved to make this change are immaterial for the council. So I don't understand why there's been a delay of almost 18 months in introducing that change. The council has been legally responsible for these care leavers since 2018, and obviously, you know, over the last 10 months or so, they will have faced even more challenges. And don't forget that those care leavers, it's too late for some of those care leavers now who have been unable to
Councillor Burgess, can there be a supplementary question briefly?
So my question is, you know, how can that long delay possibly have been justified when the amounts involved for the council are not material, and it's vulnerable people's lives we're talking about here? Thank you.
You may be interested to know, Rachel, that all the non-material costs for the council all add up and then become material. You have to make a decision based on the facts at the time. My decision at that time was I wanted to do it. I was not prepared to extend the situation that we had in children's services at that point. I now find myself, because of prudent management of the finances, that we can do it. And I would have hoped to have done more if it hadn't been for COVID. But we're going to take another hit on COVID this year, another hit of the reserves. It's a shame, because I think poverty is not, as far as I'm concerned, poverty is not a political issue. It's a true issue people suffer with, and I will do whatever I can, but I will not jeopardise the financial probity of the council. Because if I put myself in that situation, as I've said many occasions, a broke council can't help anybody.
Thank you, Councillor Kaiser. Councillor Andy Croy, your question, please, to Councillor Ullacorin Clark. We're running near the boundary now.
Thank you very much. Families with children in receipt of free school meals, where children are now learning from home, deserve continued support. It is evident in some parts of the country that the food parcels being provided in lieu of free school meals are totally inadequate. For the second full week of term, can you list the items of food typically provided per child, along with their notional supermarket cost in a typical free school meal parcel provided by the council's contracted supplier? Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
You're muted, Ullacorin.
Sorry, thank you for the question. Wokingham's contracted caterer, Caterlink, has prepared boxes in line with the food standards and the Local Authority Caterers Association's guidelines. Our boxes are produced as fortnightly hampers and differ in volume, depending on whether the child is in primary or secondary education. For our supermarket comparison, we have assessed both Tesco's and Waitrose, since school catering companies such as Caterlink do not have the equivalent buying power that industry giants such as Tesco or Asda would have when buying produce. Furthermore, Caterlink aims to source local to reduce the carbon impact of food transportation on the global climate crisis, as well as selecting quality food for the meals rather than standard items. The food parcels are a standard offering from Caterlink, and we have been assured that the food parcel that we provide more than covers a lunchtime meal that they would provide if a child was in school. Our hampers are charged at £21 per primary student and £22 per secondary student. And this includes labour costs to produce the individual hampers. The comparison cost for the contents only for primary students, if purchased from Tesco, would be £19.61 and £22.45 if purchased from Waitrose. For secondary hampers, the comparison cost, if purchased from Tesco, would be £20.78 and £23.85 if purchased from Waitrose. We believe this represents good value for money, as the remainder of any free school meal funds are retained by the school, which they are able to invest in alternative ways to additionally support these vulnerable children.
Right. Can you come to a close shortly, please, Councillor Clark?
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Croy, I would be happy to provide a comparison list in writing following full council, so you can see the comparisons yourself.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Croy, if you were very brief, can you get a quick supplementary question in on the end of it?
I can. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Clark. I've asked a very clear question and you haven't answered it, I'm afraid. I've asked for a list of prices so I can make the comparisons now. I haven't asked for a list afterwards. I think that's an appalling way to behave. You've not answered the question. You've spoken for 2 minutes.
My
question is, what are you trying to hide?
We're not hiding anything. But I only have 2 minutes to answer your question, and I have a full list here of prices. So had you preferred that I was reading the text, Tesco and Waitrose comparisons? Is the numbers you want?
I had asked for a list, yes. But I will examine the list afterwards if you could provide that to me.
To you.
Yeah, you can put it in you can send it in the newspapers when you got it, Andy.
Okay. Well, we've reached the boundary now. It was a very quick supplementary, which has been answered. So the end of that item, we now move on to agenda item 85, minutes of committee meetings and ward matters. which of course.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Sorry to interrupt. I had a late question, which I understand we've run out of time for. Will I get a written reply?
Oh yes, sorry, you will get yes. Any questions like that which come in after the time, or which the person isn't here to ask the question, gets a written reply. You will get a written reply to your question.
Thank you,
Mr. Mayor.
Unfortunately, we ran out of time. That's all.
Mr. Mayor, I do have a reply, but I assume I'm not allowed to give it.
Depends how long it takes, really. 1 minute.
Well, I can try.
Okay, if we could try that, or either that, or you can give a written reply to the supplementary.
What would you prefer?
Well, if you think you can do something useful in a minute, you can answer, or you might prefer the luxury of sending a written reply.
I think that if Ulla Karin does a reply, then I ought to have to read the question out. Otherwise, her reply to the viewers would not seem.
In that case, we've run out of time. In that case, I'm afraid. So the supplementary obviously just ran out of time before it could be completed. But I suspect that Councillor Clark, if she has the information available, will send you whatever she has relevant to your supplementary.
We will certainly do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so right, second time round, agenda item 85, minutes of committee meetings and ward matters, and of course they should apply at least to the ward you're in. There are no supplementaries allowed on this. If anyone wishes to ask a question, can you please let us know by sticking the hands up feature? Yes, some hands have gone up. And the first one is Councillor Stephen Conway, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm asking my question as Ward Councillor for Twyford, and it's directed to the Executive Member for Health, Wellbeing and Adult Services. I should like to thank him, first of all, for engaging with me on the concerns of nursery staff in Twyford, who understandably feel rather exposed in the current pandemic. The lateral flow testing that the council is introducing will help, I'm sure, here, but I'd be really grateful if he could explain how this will work in the case of nursery staff.
Thank you, Stephen. Right, to come to this, yeah, I mean, obviously we've been in contact about this, and I've had emails and correspondence from nursery staff also who are concerned about this. As you said, we are launching a community-based lateral flow programme, and the whole focus of this is on essential workers who cannot work from home and have to work through this lockdown. So groups eligible for this will be nursery staff, blue light services, essential retail, postal workers, couriers, construction workers. A full list is on the website, basically, and the aim is to sweep up everybody who's defined as an essential worker in this lockdown. To answer your question directly, it's going to be done initially via the Wokingham Centre, which is open. Two further centres are planned, which will be rolled out over the next month or so. We will look at the service. We're prepared to fund this to whatever level, because we realise the importance of this, and if this proves to be a runaway success, there will be, we will expand it to actually meet the demand that's necessary. We understand how all these people are worried and nervous, basically, given the situation, and we want to support them. So, so I would encourage the nursery you're involved in to get in contact and look for details on the website. All we are asking from people in return, and I should be very clear about this, is that lateral flow testing only has a point if it is done ideally twice weekly, at least once weekly. And we're going to be asking anybody who comes forward for this service to make that commitment, because there's no point in doing it. It just tells you on that week whether you've got COVID or not. It offers you no guarantee for the future. So that's what we'll be asking of people, but the service will be there very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Margaret. Jim Fruin, next, your question, please. Do you have your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the last full council meeting in November last year, I yet again raised concerns for the safety of Graysey residents, given the number of accidents, which sadly included 2 fatalities. Tonight, the 21st of January, is the 4th anniversary of the first of those fatal accidents. There is an excellent article in this week's Wokingham Today paper that articulates and demonstrates how we as a council have responded to those dreadful incidents over the past 4 years. To be fair, we have recently resurfaced a section of highway and refreshed road markings. Other than that, we have gathered and looked at a huge amount of data. We have looked at the feasibility of a speed camera scheme. We have looked in conjunction with the parish council at potential gateway signage. We have looked at this issue for 4 years. In the eyes of the residents, we have looked at but not taken any action. We have left residents living in fear, and we have left residents taking their own engineering activities to protect their homes, such as reinforcing driveway gates, installing new
Councillor Fruin, is there a question there somewhere? There's been a lot of background. Can you ask the question, please?
I'm just coming to the question now. My question is, when can I expect to receive the written response to my supplementary question asked in November? I have waited patiently but not received it yet. And can Gracie residents expect to see any tangible action with regards to their safety as a result of all of the looking that we've undertaken? If we're not going to do anything, let's tell them, not leave them resting for 4 years.
Malcolm, I believe it must be with me because, sorry, Mr. Mayor, this must be with me because I'm standing in for Councillor Yorkson tonight. I'm aware that this issue has been dragging on. One of the reasons, and it could be the reason for which it has been dragging on, is that we're still awaiting a report from the police. I don't know whether we've had it, but if you asked a supplementary in November, we should certainly reply to it, and I shall make sure that it is replied to. But I'm very happy to sponsor a meeting between the officers, the executive member for highways and yourself to discuss this.
Thank you very much indeed, John.
Thank you. So we move out quickly then to Councillor Clive James to ask his question, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We now have nearly 700 signatures to a Liberal Democrat petition against building on Swallows Meadow in Hawkden Ward, which I'm sure you'll agree is a very good number of signatures. One of my residents has asked me if I have seen the developer's ecology report. This is a report that one of the contractors who was cutting down the trees and bushes on the site in November claimed showed that there was no evidence of any wildlife living in Swallows Meadow, not even a mouse. Absolute rubbish. Can the executive member for the environment find out if Wokingham Borough Council has got a copy of the ecology report, and if they have, will he ask them to share it with the Hawkden Ward members? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clive. I fully support what you say. I will look into this and I'll ask the right appropriate questions and I'll get back to you.
Thank you, Barry. Okay. Thank you.
Next one in line is Councillor Caroline Smith, please.
Hello, good evening. My question's for highways. So anyway, thank you. At the beginning of October 2020, we were informed of a Wokingham Traffic Road Order consultation, which had started on the 13th of October, and according to the maps on the website, these TROs may adversely affect the residents of Hillmanton. The TRO consultation website has only one single document, a PDF reference P00820, which comprises of some 29 maps with no index, and we're still waiting for draft orders, statement of reasons, and an index of plans. So please, can you tell me when this is going to happen? Thank you.
All right. So,
genuinely, Caroline, I have no idea.
Okay, then I'll email Pauline.
I'm prepared to take it up on your behalf, or if you'd like to email Pauline.
Well, we'll both do it. Shall we both do it?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. Next one then is Councillor David Hare, please. Councillor David Hare.
Thank you, Mayor. In June last year, Early Town Council and the Early Environmental Group both made submissions as part of the local plan update consultation, seeking Swallows Meadow in Hawkden Ward to be designated as local green space. I'm afraid that subsequent to this, the land has been sold and new owners have indicated a wish to build a supermarket and 40 homes on this site that had been rich in flora and fauna and the much valued place for recreation. Given the fast pace at which these unexpected events have unfolded, can the executive member please expedite the application for local green space designation rather than waiting for it to be considered with all the other LGS submissions?
Right, and who's going to deal with that?
I'll deal with that, Malcolm.
Right.
Yes, we can look into that, David. I'm very aware of this site, on including the points that Clive's made, and I'm not aware of that report either. So I'll pick up both matters.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Nice quick one. The next hand in the air is Councillor Gary Cowan.
Thank you, Malcolm. An Ardfield resident did ask me, with the local plan evolving, there'll be lots of green fields to be concreted over, and as a result, the administration won't have any long grass to kick things into. So I did reply that we have lots of green grass in the north of the borough you can use, so there wouldn't be a problem. I would wonder if the leader would agree that that was an okay answer.
So, who's going to pick that up?
Well, I think I'm the leader, but I think it was a rhetoric question.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So
his own question.
In that case, we look down the list, and there are no further hands in the air. So that will be the end of that item, and we move on to agenda item 86, which are statements by the leader, executive members, and deputy executive members. And if you'd like to decide who's going to speak by sticking your hands in the air, please. And the first one here is Councillor Charles Margetts.
Mayor,
I think it's the leader to go first, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry?
I believe it's traditional for the leader to go first.
Oh, okay, sorry. I asked for people to stick hands in the air and I went by the hands. Yes, I do apologise, Councillor Halsall. Yes, if you'd like to speak first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would ask permission, Mr. Mayor, I would like to ask your permission to hold a minute's silence for those who have died during the dreadful pandemic in the UK and the hundreds of thousands of people around the world.
Certainly, we may do that.
Okay, so may I continue? Then the executive have had to take several urgent decisions over the last couple of months. All these decisions were considered urgent because they related to the council's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, including the requirement to distribute government funds as soon as possible. All these decisions were taken in accordance with the council's constitution and with the agreement of the mayor. In accordance with the Constitution, I'm therefore reporting on those specific decisions which, because of their urgency and the fact that any delay in implementing them could have seriously prejudiced the council's and all the public's interest, were not subject to call-in. The decisions taken at recent executive meetings under these rules were: on the 24th of September, the purchase of COVID-19 tests. On the 2nd December, COVID Winter Grant Scheme and Additional Restrictions Grant, Discretionary Grant Scheme Phase 1. And then the 17th of December, the Adult Social Care COVID response. A question was raised by a member of the public, Mr. Philip Meadowcraft, as to whether the composition of its members was in conformance with 9.11 of the Constitution. He was correct. There was an anomaly, and I thanked him for raising it. Genuinely, it was a surprise that the committee had been so constituted for 21 months, spanning 2 annual council meetings. Neither had any member of the committee, nor officers, nor members, nor the press raised this issue
Point of order,
previously.
4212D. Councillor Lindsay Ferris.
Yes, and what's the challenge?
I think that what John Halsall is about to mention, I think should have proper discussion referred to at least the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And he also mentioned a resident's name, and I think that as a result of the actions arising at that meeting of the Standards Committee, I believe the Leader of the Council owes that member of public a public apology for the way he was treated at that meeting. In addition, I also believe the Leader of the Council owes this meeting of the Council an apology for the dismissive way that this administration has acted. I am sure you can see the irony of having a Standards Committee which is supposed to oversee all aspects of the Council only to find itself unconstitutional. I also want to say that I did note there are a number of things coming through the executive.
Point of order, please, Councillor Croy here. A point of order must, in the first instance, mention the part of the Constitution.
I did.
Well, you haven't.
Andy, Andy, he did. He did.
I did. I pointed out to 4212D, Andy.
Yes, you did indeed. Yes. Continue. Yes.
Perhaps Councillor Croy should listen.
May I continue, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please do so.
I've asked whether you would refer that to the Overview and Scrutiny, and I also think that it's probably unconstitutional for you to talk about this issue. It's a conflict of interest here.
Excuse me, I'm just going to mute myself and take the camera off. Consultation. It seems, Councillor Ferris, that we need to know what you want to happen. Really, do you want to get it reported somewhere or take some action on it? What exactly are you expecting to happen, and we can perhaps take a vote on it or whatever.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I think there are several issues here. One is that I think that the issue that John was about to raise does need to have proper discussion referred to, and I'm suggesting the Overview and Scrutiny Committee as a best option, I believe. There is also the issue of the way the Leader of the Council treated the member of the public.
Which sounds like another thing that you would put to the same committee.
It's all linked in. It's the way the member of the public was treated, because he was muted midway through his asking his supplementary question. And I have to say that in any documentation I've seen associated with that meeting, no mention is made of that. And the third point is I've asked for him to apologise publicly to that member of public.
Right. It's a little bit complex. I need to seek some further advice for the moment. What I'm being advised already is that this is not an appropriate thing to be discussed. Yeah, just a moment.
Been a conflict of interest, I believe.
It's a bit muddled. I'm trying to get from you, Councillor Ferris, what exactly you want to happen. Are you asking for something to be referred or dealt with in a little clearer manner? Because it seems to be some accusations and half a question.
I think there are 4 parts.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor, this is not an appropriate time for Mr. Ferris to raise this. And
okay.
I also don't think it's an appropriate time for the leader of the council, who was directly involved with an issue, to raise this issue at the council. If somebody else had raised it, that would have been a different issue, but it's not. The leader of the council, where you were directly involved with an issue, there's a conflict of interest here. You've mentioned a discussion between a member of the public, and I've just referred to the fact that I've asked you to give a public apology to that person.
Well,
and I've also suggested that the issue that I think that was happened.
Sorry, can I cut across you again? This is getting into a sort of long discussion, accusation, a counter accusation, and asking impossible questions for answers that need some further discussion.
Put it right.
Can I simply ask that Councillor Halsall be permitted to finish his current conversation, and you can raise the issues of what you were going to do as a separate offline one? Otherwise, we won't get through much of the.
Part of it is a conflict of interest issue, which I think is whether he should be talking about this issue or not.
Can I ask Councillor Halsall, are you likely to be progressing further information on this thing he's querying, or could you actually continue the rest of your comments?
Mr. Mayor, there's another point of order I just heard.
I would really like to continue my comments. I think it's completely out of order.
Mr. Mayor, before we continue with anything further, it's now 10:05, and I would like to raise 4 to 12 M, which is to request an extension of the meeting for an additional half hour, so that we can at least have a stab at getting towards the end of the meeting, even though we're not going to get anywhere near.
Yes,
thank you.
I agree.
And I will second that, Mr. Mayor. Stephen Conway.
Thank you. So it's Councillor Troubray and Stephen Conway. I intend to go to the vote on that. Can I do the hands up and down bit as quickly as we can, please? Can everybody take their hands down? And we'll ask for all those in favour. If you can take all your hands down first, please. All hands down. There's still hands up somewhere.
Harry.
Can you take them down?
John Kaiser.
Charles Mulgett.
There's still a couple of hands up.
Maybe they're voting for it.
Well, I want them to take it down so they can all stick them up and we can count them. Otherwise, we've got hands going up and down. Right, everything down. Now, everybody who's in favour of extending the meeting to 11 o'clock, please put their hands up now.
Only if you can get them to stop wasting time, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, that's a valid point. So we just counting the hands up now. 4.
This is progress to be welcomed.
And so we never listen, Clive.
Thank
no,
you, John.
but you just said it.
Okay, count to them. Hands down, all hands down, please. Everybody's hands down. Still several hands sitting up there. This is taking time. Can you take it down, please? All hands down as a start point. There are still hands sitting in the air. Thank you. Right. Can you now vote if you are against extending it? Use your hand up if you are against extending. Right. Okay. Hands down. I'm not sure if it is worthy of asking an abstention, but if you wish to abstain on this, please put the hands up again now. Right. We've counted them, and the meeting will continue until 11 o'clock this evening. Thank you for that. So if we can return then.
Now take my point of order. 4.2.12D.
Okay, and what was it to do with?
We have already discussed the matter of scrutinising the Standards Committee last night at the Overview and Scrutiny Management meeting, when it was put forward, when I proposed that we should put it on the programme to scrutinise the Standards Committee and examine how it deals with complaints from within the borough, but also town and parish councillors. So it's already on the being proposed and will be decided at the next meeting in February.
Yes, and I remember that. That's a good idea. So in fact, we can forget that particular point about that, about the standards thing at the moment. I would like Councillor Halsall to continue his talk, please, as the leader. Please continue, Councillor Halsall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess I better start the paragraph again. A question was raised by a member of the public, Philip Meadowcroft, as to whether the composition of its members was in conformance with 9.1 of the Constitution. He was correct. There was an anomaly.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
For raising it.
Yes, what is the point?
It's 4.2.13.13, personal explanation. I attended that meeting, and the leader has made reference to the fact that every single member of the council was not aware of the changes to the Constitution and the committee being set up illegally. They then took legal advice which suggested that a legal issue as part of the Constitution was legal and part of it was locally agreed, that the council could change whatever it liked locally agreed at council, but it couldn't change the legal issues. He then made a reference to the fact that all of the councillors had not made any reference to this, which again was a correct point. But what he fails to understand is that in my 20 odd years in the council, never ever have I been in a situation where the Constitution was changed without reference to the Standards Committee and it being brought to council for ratification. This was never done in this case. So his inference that all of us would know all about it, we relied on officers and the executive to advise us, they failed. If this matter should not be discussed, it should be left to overview and scrutiny. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I don't think that was a point of order, to be honest. I would like Councillor Halsall to try and continue successfully. We've extended the meeting in order to get things covered, and we're dragging it down with lots of slow interrupts and points of order, none of which will be resolved quickly in this way, because they're just people shouting across each other. So, Councillor Halsall, can you have yet another go at trying to continue?
Let's start again the paragraph.
If we can't agree the Constitution, we might as well all go home.
Councillor Cowan, can you let Councillor Halsall continue?
A question was raised by a member of the public, Mr. Philip Meadowcroft, as to whether the composition of its members was in conformance with 9.11 of the Constitution. He was correct. There was an anomaly. I have thanked him for raising it, and incidentally, I have also apologised for dismissing him. Genuinely, it was a surprise that the committee had been so constituted for 21 months, spanning 2 annual council meetings. Neither had any member of the committee, nor officers, nor members, nor press raised this previously. If there is a fault, it is jointly and several of all. Had I been aware of the clause, I would have not have proposed our appointments. Indeed, immediately on being aware, I corrected the membership to the rule. I apologise to members and officers for this anomaly. I thank the members of the committee, the officers supporting the committee, and the independent person for all the good work which has been undertaken. The Chief Executive has assured members that although an inconsistency existed, the appointments were made by full council and therefore were constitutional. The Chief Executive has also pointed out that the composition and operation of the standard boards are not statutory but local preference. I would like to thank all those who have played a part in helping those who have suffered not just the effect of the virus, but the problems which have accompanied with it. This includes all carers, doctors, health staff, social care staff, emergency services, health, police, fire, rescue, ambulance, teachers, school staff, charities, in short, everybody who has stepped up to the plate and made it possible for life to continue during these unspeakable times. So to you all of you, thank you, Mayor, Mr. Mayor. If you will indulge me one more time, I would like the council to give a round of applause to these heroes of the community without whom the world would have been a darker place. We are continuing to face coronavirus. Initially, we thought it would be short. This has not been the case. However, there is light at the end of the very dark tunnel with a vaccine developed here in record time. Thank you to our brilliant scientists. We in WBC have navigated with a steady hand through the emergency, changing the way we worked, supporting all our residents and ensuring that services ran as normally as possible. Whilst this was expensive financially, it was eminently doable in the short term. Much of that which we did during the crisis, we shall need to continue to do for some time. We are faced with additional challenges, the biggest and most important of which is the rollout of the vaccinations across the borough at the same time, ensuring continuity in all our essential services which our residents rely on. To this end, the council are committing to a further investment in our community to help GPs in our borough to administer the vaccine as quickly as possible to all our residents. The investment is only possible because of the well-run and excellent control the Conservative administration has exerted over the council finances for many years. As such, I'm pleased to announce an additional 1.2 million to be made available during this financial year. The money will come from the council's general reserves built up over the years, despite being the lowest funded unitary council in the UK. These funds will be made available not only to help the rollout of the vaccination programme, but to support and boost our fly tipping and anti-fly tipping initiative, assisting preschools, keeping the homeless and rough sleepers off the streets, and supporting charities whom, along with preschools, are very much part of the vital support structure of our community. Tonight, you will hear my executive talk about how this money will be channeled to the areas needed in the community, how it is designed to help Woking Borough get back on its feet, repair the damage done during the past 10 months, and ensure those things which have been on hold during the pandemic can start to fully function again as quickly as possible. As my deputy leader, member for Finance and Housing, has said many times, during the pandemic, reserves are much like fire extinguishers. You can use them in time of need. And I'm sure we would disagree. This is one of those, and thankfully, few times. As such, much like our commitment to child hunger, poverty and homelessness.
Could you move to completion fairly quickly, please, Councillor Halsall?
Conservative controlled council will not be found wanting in these times when residents need support. Lastly, please follow the government guidelines for physical hygiene, social distancing, cover your face when required to, and encourage others to do so as well. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Halsall. Councillor Kaiser, I believe you would like to speak, and then Councillor Luckerin-Clark will follow you. So if we can get through the items quickly, please. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I had a very, very nice speech prepared, but for the sake of brevity and not wanting to repeat a lot of what the leader said, I will forego my opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we then move on to Councillor Luckerin-Clark, and that will be followed by Councillor Charles Margetts. So Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I am pleased to announce that the Council is going to continue to cover the costs of free school meals during the school holidays in 2021. In respect of financial support for our schools, settings who claim the early years education grant have received 100% of this throughout the pandemic, regardless of whether their children on roll have attended or not, and this continues at least through this term. Where necessary, settings have made excellent use of the COVID business support grant that our council has made available. We recognize that in respect of private nurseries and preschools, some may be impacted by the loss of income from parents whose children are not attending due to the pandemic. To ensure settings will still be in business once we have come out of lockdown, we are therefore putting in place a new Wokingham Borough Council funded grant scheme to support such providers with gaps in their funding. And we will be shortly providing guidance how to go about this. As you all know, there's a motion on tonight's agenda regarding free school meals. There are 3 resolutions in that motion calling on action from the council, and I'd like to address those. As you're aware, we are using government grants to cover free school meals during school holidays while the pandemic continues. We are also...
Mr. Mayor, sorry to interrupt you, Corinne. Standing Order 4223 limits the time for executive statements to 20 minutes, and we have now gone considerably over 20 minutes, I'm afraid, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
I would like to dispute that, Mr. Mayor, because much of those 20 minutes were occupied with the opposition intervening.
That is not allowed for in the Constitution, which sets a time limit of 20 minutes.
Okay, so the end
of the Constitution.
That can't be correct, because it means that anyone could then interrupt to prevent any statements to be read out.
It's your Constitution, you know, I'm just reading it out.
The Mayor can use his discretion.
It doesn't matter. They throw the Constitution out if it suits them.
Absolutely right, Gary.
Well, yeah, this is what I've been saying. Well,
I'm asking Mr. Mayor to use your discretion and let me finish, please.
If I'm permitted to make a decision, I would like Councillor Clark to finish her present one and at least have one more speaker. If you want to do any motions tonight, then we need to move on fairly quickly. So can Councillor Clark finish hers without any challenges, and then maybe one more speaker and then on to the motions? Otherwise, we'll not deal with any motions tonight, will we?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
We are also and will continue to work with local organisations to make sure no child in our borough goes hungry. The leader has joined me in writing to the Secretary of State for Education, not just to ask for the expansion of free school meals to be permanent for those with no recourse to public funds, but we have also gone further in asking that consideration be given for an uplift in universal credit to make sure no child goes without food. In addition to this, we are asking that the free school meal provision for primary school children is permanently extended to include all primary school children and not just those in reception year 1 and year 2. Therefore, it would make sense for Councillor Bray to withdraw her motion to make time for others. But if she insists on moving it, we will vote for it, since we have already done everything in it. This Conservative administration will always be on the side of families and those in need. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Move very quickly.
I'd be delighted to withdraw it, seeing as it's forced them into doing what I wanted. That's brilliant.
Okay. Thank you. Can I move on to Councillor Charles Margett then, please? Councillor Margett, if you can do something quickly. We need to get a motion through tonight, don't we?
Yeah, I'll be as quick as I can. I wanted to take this opportunity to update members on the latest situation with COVID and our efforts to support the community. You'll have heard from my colleague, Councillor Halsall, that the Council is releasing 1.2 million from its reserves to fund further steps across the borough. I'd like to detail some of these for you. This expenditure is only possible because we've managed to rebuild our reserves since the first lockdown, and it shows our commitment to follow through what we say with what we do, basically, when it comes to COVID-19. The vaccination programme, which is run by the CCG, has got off to a good start locally and has been underway in Wokingham since mid-December. Vaccinations are now underway in every part of the borough. We estimate that 90% of care home residents and over 80s have now received their first dose, 54% of social care staff, and 35% of 75 to 79-year-olds. Vaccinations have now started in some areas in the 70s to 74 age group. I'd like to thank our GPs and their staff who are working incredibly hard for our benefit. WBC is supporting GPs by assisting with bookings, traffic marshals and resourcing. I'd also like to thank all the volunteers who stepped forward to help with this programme, as well as our partners at the Working and Volunteer Centre who've helped organise the programme. It's important that I'm realistic with members going forwards. Indications we're now receiving from the health service and from PHE are that it is likely the vaccination programme is going to continue for the next few years, and we are planning for this situation. It's key that we speed up the vaccination programme on a local and national level. WBC is committed to ensuring that all working residents are vaccinated ASAP and is actively lobbying the CCG and local MPs for more vaccine. However, there is currently a national issue with this level of supply of vaccine, which is restricting the growth of the programme across some parts of the country. Our GPs have more than enough capacity to deliver the current level of vaccine they're receiving. So it is important to build the capacity now for the day when vaccine supplies are greater. WBC has secured several sites across the borough and is ready to move them into action as soon as there is vaccine supply available to make that worthwhile. WBC is funding this plan alongside our colleagues on the NHS and will be providing staff to run it when the supply of vaccine is available. We are also of the understanding that national government plans to open a large vaccination centre in Reading, which will be available to working residents at some point in the near future. As you heard earlier, we're planning to launch a community-based lateral flow programme. This will focus on essential workers who cannot work from home, are working and have no choice but to come into contact with other people during this lockdown. The aim of this is to lower the risk of COVID and its transmission by identifying those who may have the infection with no symptoms and therefore do not know they have it. This will apply to people who are Wokingham residents and to those who work in Wokingham but live elsewhere. The priority of this programme is to restrict the spread of COVID-19. I detailed earlier that the test centres will be set up and the Wokingham one is ready now. WBC is recruiting staff to run this programme and expects to create in excess of 40 new jobs within our community to support this. Anyone who's interested in applying for one of these positions can see the details on the website. We'll have the capacity to give lateral flow tests to 800 people a day across our test centres, and we'll expand the operation if it comes close to capacity. We'll also offer a targeted mobile testing facility to support outbreaks and other COVID-related testing needs in our ward and the community. I will re-emphasise the point I made earlier. Lateral flow tests only work if they're done on ideally twice a week and at least once a week. Therefore, the council will insist that anyone who commits comes for testing every week. Details of how to obtain testing will be on the website shortly. In conclusion, Mr. Mayor, I would say vaccination provides real hope for the future. However, we still have the difficult winter months to come before its effects are felt. It's very important that for the short-term, medium-term future, everyone follows the full lockdown advice, maintains social distance, wears a mask when appropriate, and continues to isolate properly if asked to. Case numbers are now starting to fall in Wokingham, but it's really important that we continue to work together to ensure that trend continues until the situation is better. Thank you, Mr. Bear.
Well done, sir.
As time is getting short, I'd like to move on. We've obviously exceeding the time, so let's move on to agenda item 87, which is motions. And the first motion we got here, motion 450, is for proposer Andy Croy. Councillor Croy, are you going to be proposing this?
Yes, I am, thank you.
And who's going to be your seconder?
Councillor Duran is going to be my seconder.
Okay, thank you. So you now have a chance to speak on your motion, Councillor Croy, starting now.
Thank you very much. We need a citizens' assembly on the climate emergency because the current climate plan isn't up to the job. From the very beginning, we have seen existing projects, including road building, shoehorned into the plan. We have had the bizarre spectacle of council voting to support the expansion of Heathrow, airport, while at the same time council claiming to be serious about the climate emergency. We have also had zero meaningful engagement with the public. Engagement does not mean the council Facebook page telling people how great the council is doing, and it does not mean endless hours talking around the subject with no follow-up. Think of a citizens' assembly as a giant jury. Any person in the borough could possibly...
The Conservative administration has not supported the building of Heathrow willy-nilly, as it's suggested.
So that's not a point of order. Okay.
There was no number.
And any person in the borough could possibly sit on this jury, but membership of this jury is not totally random. The composition of this jury must reflect the borough as a whole. It must be representative of the whole borough, rural and urban, young and old, BAME and not BAME. The characteristics of our population must be reflected in the assembly in the same proportion as they exist in the wider borough. The jury must reflect the borough, or it will not speak for the borough. Residents must have confidence that the Citizens' Assembly is not any kind of political stitch-up or just a hand-picked group selected to provide a particular outcome or send a particular message. Jury selection must be transparent. It must not only be free of bias, it must be seen to be free from bias. The Citizens' Assembly will listen to contributions from external experts, a full range of experts who will explain options not even considered in the current plan. The residents will engage with experts and ask the questions they want answered. The residents will be presented with evidence and have expert advice on hand to help them understand the evidence and draw their own conclusions, not the conclusions presented to them by politicians. There will be no political filters and distortions, just a representative sample of our residents engaging meaningfully with experts. The Citizens' Assembly will vote on recommendations which will have been garnered by professional facilitators. Voting will be secret. It is important that residents are able to cast their votes, or the jury members are able to cast their votes without pressure from anyone else. Assembly members are not elected representatives or delegates with a personal constituency to who they are responsible. The recommendations of the Assembly must be accepted by this council. We need to trust our residents enough to give us a clear direction to carbon neutrality by 2030. I trust our residents to make decisions that we can all get behind, and I hope you can vote to support our residents and to support this motion too. Thank you. Hello?
Sent us all to sleep.
Malcolm, are you there?
Right, sorry, yeah, I'm here, thank you. Councillor Tahir, would you like to speak? Your hand is in the air. Just a moment,
yes.
Just a moment.
I have to second this first. Can I speak, Mr. Mayor?
Hello, I'm back. Sorry, I wanted to know, does anyone wish to speak against the motion?
Sorry, Mr. Are you asking me to speak or not?
No, sorry, Councillor Tahir. No, I'm not asking. I misread my own notes, basically, and I offered you a chance to speak when, in fact, I should be saying, does anyone wish to speak against this motion when it comes up for discussion? Is there anyone speaking against, or are they in favour? That's what I'm asking. If you are against, would you put your hands in the air, please, if you intend to speak against this motion? Well, first of all, can you take all the hands down?
Mr. Mayor, shouldn't Carl be allowed to second the motion?
If you ask the seconder first, if they would like to speak or reserve their right first.
No, the seconder is named as Councillor Doran.
No, it's fine. Malcolm's correct. Sorry, carry on, Malcolm.
Yes, it's Councillor. Now, at this point, normally we would ask the seconder and so on, but on the basis that this, I think, is one that may or may not go through quickly, but there's an option to speak against the motion if everybody puts their hands down, and then I can ask if anyone intends to speak, they can put their hand, speak against it, they can put their hand up. Okay. So, Councillor Murray, then, will you be speaking against this?
Mr. Mayor, I will be speaking against this motion.
Okay, just a moment. Yes, I've just checked my notes here. If there is anyone going to speak against it, then we have to go through the normal process, in which case at this point I can ask the seconder, Councillor Doran, if he wishes to speak now or defer it till later.
Yeah, I'd like to speak now, please, Mr. Mayor.
Like to speak now, yes, please do so.
Thank you. Okay, when this council declared a climate emergency in July 2019, it was my amended motion that was accepted and voted through unanimously. The intention of that amendment was to directly involve our residents in order to leverage the ability, the intelligence and the imagination that will be required to deal with this emergency. That wish to directly involve our residents has been ignored by this executive. And that is why the current climate emergency plan will definitely not make Wokingham Borough carbon neutral by 2030. Our mission should have been clear. Our planning should have been efficient and effective, and our residents should have been heavily and directly involved. But because they weren't, the plan is already, on its own terms, a failure. The motive behind this motion is to commit this council to create a citizens' assembly on the climate emergency. That assembly will devolve to our residents the power to investigate what should be done and, crucially, allow them to make decisions. I think our residents are up for this climate fight and their voices must be properly heard. I'm not convinced all members present here have the stomach for this fight. Sir David Attenborough, commenting on how we deal with the climate emergency, said, "You can't be radical enough in dealing with these issues." But the question is, how can we take the electorate with us? A citizens' assembly is the answer to Sir David's question. The climate emergency is not a political issue, it's a moral one. So let's put aside the politics, stop clinging to this failed climate plan and vote this motion through. The only question for members tonight is whether you trust residents to do that or not. If you do, vote for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doran. Well, on the basis that people who want to speak, because his hand's in the air, I will go to the first person, which is Councillor Swaddle, please. And then that will be followed by Councillor Murray.
Mr. Mayor, you already said you were going to take Councillor Murray after Councillor Doran.
Okay, if you're happy to swap, because just your hand is in the air first, that's all. But Councillor Murray, if you'd like to go first then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I wanted to support this motion. I agree with the intent of this motion. I am on the record both at the executive and at the last full council meeting in supporting engaging our residents in our climate emergency action plan further in the future. But as I said in response to a question from Councillor Swaddle at the last full council meeting, Citizens' Assembly isn't a catch-all term for engaging residents in our climate emergency. A Citizens' Assembly is one of many methods of local democratic process that are available to us in engaging our residents. Mr. Mayor, voting for this motion would commit our council to just one form of local democratic process without giving any consideration or scrutiny to the other methods available. This motion makes no reference to citizens' juries, citizens' advisory panels, consultations, citizens' forums, focus groups, e-panels, local issues forums, or undertaking more crowdsourcing like we've already done. Any of the methods that I've just mentioned or any of the over 30 other methods of local deliberative process could provide us with significantly more relevant recommendations to our climate emergency and to our action plan. Any of those other methods could provide us with much clearer and more thought through and more appropriate actions for our action plan. That does not mean that conducting a citizens' assembly is not the right option for us at some point in the future. But Mr. Mayor, fellow councillors, until we have done the due diligence on the other methods available to us, we simply cannot make a commitment to just one option and just ignore the other 30 plus potential options. It would be reckless of us to vote for one option without first doing the due diligence and investigating the others. It would be negligent of us not to do the due diligence before making a decision. Our residents deserve more than that, and our climate needs us to do more work before we commit. Mr. Mayor, I tried to amend this motion. All I wanted to change was to substitute any reference to Citizens' Assembly to the words local democratic process. This would have committed Council to delivering on the intention of this motion, but without committing to one course of action without first examining all of the others. I was told by Democratic Services this was not acceptable. I wrote to Councillor Croy as the proposer, asking him to amend this motion for the reasons that I've just stated. The motion remains unchanged. I offered to do the due diligence with the officers and then allow the cross-party working group to make the decision. It was rejected point blank. Mr. Mayor, I would have gladly voted for this motion, committing our council to undertake one or more local democratic processes, but not agreeing to amend the motion is evident that acting in the true best interest of our residents is not the intention of this motion. Blindly committing us to one course of action without exploring the other options available is. Because this motion is too limiting, has not considered the other options available to us, and is not in the best interest of our climate emergency or our residents, the Conservative group will be voting against. I would also add a piece of context. I've spent a lot of time talking to the people at Extinction Rebellion. They're calling for a citizens' assembly nationally. Locally, they are calling for local democratic processes, the type that I am advocating. Mr. Mayor, I encourage all members to reject this motion and allow us to do the work to actually work out what the best option for our council is.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. And next hand is Councillor Halsall, please. Would you like to speak on this?
Mr. Mayor, I thought you said I could speak after Councillor.
Yes, but your name.
Mr. Mayor, I thought I was going to be able to speak.
Yes, there are several of them, but the hands disappear off the list, and then there's a random chance of where they come back on. The system I've got.
Mr. Mayor, can I give my hand to Alison, please?
Yes, certainly. Councillor Swaddle, would you carry on? Because Councillor House has passed his option to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Halsall, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. Much of what I was going to say has been eloquently expressed by Councillor Murray. And so I can just confirm that it would be reckless of us to commit to one course of action when we haven't yet finished investigating all the other forms of local democratic processes that are available to us. We owe it to our residents to get this right, and we can't just jump on the bandwagon of having a citizens' assembly before we explore the many other methods of enabling a cross-section of our residents to deliberate and contribute to our climate emergency action plan. And I absolutely agree that this is one of the most important things we're doing for the next generations, and we have to get it right. So I urge you to vote against this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swaddle. Tahir, would you like to speak quickly? And next.
Well, I'd like to speak as long as other people have had the chance.
Yes, well, yes. We're just going to get through.
All
yes.
Right. I paraphrase from the preamble to the Liberal Democrat Constitution. The Liberal Democrats exist to build and safeguard a fair, free and open society in which we seek to balance the fundamental values of liberty, equality and community. It goes on to say that we believe that the role of the state, in this case, local authorities, is to enable citizens to attain these ideals, to contribute fully to their communities and to take part in the decision which affects their lives. That said, the Liberal Democrats support motion 450 submitted by Councillor Andy Croyle, both because of its emphasis on climate emergency, and that's an important issue, and residents' involvement. It should be noted that we hold meaningful public consultation that affects public lives as a principle. We also note that although Citizens' Assembly is an option, there are other alternatives available that are more collaborative and inclined to adoptive consensus decision-making and acceptance by majority. One suggested recently by me was for the Poverty Truth Commission, but there are others, voluntary panels, feedback from surveys, an independent selected panel, and others that have been suggested as well. But I think we need to reiterate that as a group, we are happy to support this motion as we feel it's fundamentally correct because it relates to climate emergency and we shouldn't discard that. So we urge Councillor Croy to maybe consider other matters as well, other than just simply the Citizens' Assembly, but we support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next person to speak is Councillor Gary Cowan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If there is other support for it, I would actually like to see a recorded vote for this. I would be one supporting it, and I would be interested if other members would. I support the motion, and I think Councillor Doran presented his comments very, very well, which I would agree with. My concern is how the ruling Conservative Party sees residents. It's not really one form, but one form of many. One doesn't have to say, if we do this, we can't do anything else, because we can certainly do this. We can certainly then do other things as well that Councillor Murray alluded to. So it's not really one course of action, but it's the first of many options that are available to us. I mean, we can see how we go back in time to Clive Schaefer's motion on highways issues, how that ended up in the long grass. And this could be exactly the same, or it's heading that way. I do believe that we should, have a recorded vote. I will support it. And I do think we should see this as one of many options that are available to us on climate change. It shouldn't be excluded, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cowan. If you want a recorded vote, you have to ask for it at the time of taking the vote rather than now. So the next speaker then is Sarah Kerr.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't actually going to speak on this item because I would have thought it would have unanimous support, but sadly not. I just want to remind everyone who's making the decision whether to vote for or against that this motion isn't actually precluding the council from using other methods of reaching out to the public. They can be done in addition as well. So it's not asking you just to commit just to one form, as Councillor Murray suggested. The deliberative method of decision making is actually a really important one, and something that we just don't see at this authority, but other authorities around the country do use, particularly in this area of something that is actually quite a challenging topic. And something that there are going to be measures that need to be taken, that it is so important that we get that public involvement. And earlier we've heard tonight about, being transparent and being democratic. And this is a fantastic way of doing that. But as I say, this doesn't preclude from other democratic processes. So I strongly urge everybody to support this if they're serious about tackling climate change. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Next one is Councillor Halsall, please. Would you like to speak now?
I'd like to support Councillor Murray that it does preclude. It actually says that this should be the main vehicle. The opportunities for changing the motion were rejected, so I'm afraid I have to support Councillor Murray that we can't support it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Halsall. So there are no hands up at the moment. So according to my sequence of events, the next person then would be Councillor Doran. No, he's already spoken, hasn't he? So Councillor Croy, would you like to have the right to reply?
Thank you very much. I would. I'll try and respond to some of the comments that have been made. There was an attempted amendment. The amendment was rejected because it breached the condition in the Constitution which says that amendments must not negate motions. If you're putting forward an amendment to negate my motion, of course it's going to be rejected. What did you think was going to happen? You're talking about other forms of consultation and engagement. The council has a terrible record on consultation and engagement. Using one of these other methods that you've mentioned is going to be seen as just the same old Woking Borough Council doing half-hearted consultations. It's going to be the same old political fix that the Citizens' Assembly will avoid. And if the Citizens' Assembly says, let's have some other methods of consultation, that's fine, we can do that. It doesn't preclude anything. But what we have to do is to have a form of engagement that can make decisions. And a Citizens' Assembly will make decisions. None of the other forms of engagement that Gregor has mentioned are decision making. They all assume that they will refine and hone an existing plan. The plan doesn't work.
That's incorrect, Mr. Mayor. That is incorrect.
We need something better. We need something better. Talking about due diligence over and over again, you know, where was the due diligence on the plan? The plan that on the climate emergency action plan that doesn't add up. It didn't add up. It still doesn't add up. We're 18 months down the line, and I can't even count the number of trees we've planted. You know, we've not even started. We don't have time to run through Gregor's list of 15 or 16 steps or whatever the number is in order to bring something else into play. So I would urge people, if you want to see real action, if you want to challenge our residents, if you want to trust our residents, please vote for this motion. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. So we now go to the vote. Councillor Cowan has suggested a recorded vote, but you'll need at least 6 of you to stand up for that. Can you stick your hand up if you want a recorded vote? Yep, you've got it. So it's a recorded vote. So at this point, we can involve the Chief Executive Officer again to do the recorded vote.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a vote where you can either say for, against, or abstention in regards to the motion. So I'll read your names out now. So Keith Baker.
Abstain.
Parry Bath.
Against.
Rachel Bishop-Burr.
For.
Laura Blumenthal.
Against.
Chris Bowering.
Against.
Shirley Boyd.
For.
Prue Bray.
For.
Rachel Burgess.
For.
Jenny Chang.
Against.
Ulla Corinne Clark.
Against.
Stephen Conway.
For.
Gary Cowan.
For.
Andy Croy.
For.
Richard Delinsky.
For.
Carl Duran.
For.
Lindsay Ferris.
For.
Michael Firmager.
Against.
Paul Fishwick.
For.
Jim Fruin.
For.
Maria G. Maria's gone home.
She's
broke
left
her
the
arm
building
yesterday, and she's just not up to continuing with the meeting, so she's gone home, I'm afraid. Guy Granderson.
Against.
Charlotte Haytham Taylor.
Against.
John Halsall.
Against.
David Howe.
For.
Pauline Hellier Simons.
Against.
Emma Hobbs.
Against.
Graham Howe.
Against.
Clive Jones.
For.
John Kaiser.
Against.
Sarah Kerr.
For.
Diane King.
Against.
Abdul Loys.
Against.
Tahir Maher.
For.
Charles McGatts.
Against.
Adrian Mather.
For.
Ken Mile.
Against.
Andrew Mickleborough.
For.
Stuart Monroe.
Against.
Gregor Murray.
Against.
Barry Patman.
Against.
Malcolm Richards.
Abstain.
Angus Ross.
Against.
Daniel Sargent.
Against.
Imogen Shepherd de Bay.
For.
Rochelle Shepherd de Bay.
For.
Caroline Smith.
For.
Chris Smith.
Against.
Wayne Smith.
Against.
Bill Sloan.
Against.
Alison Swaddle.
Against.
Simon Weeks.
Against.
Thank you. What's happened?
Malcolm has disappeared.
Malcolm, are you coming back?
I haven't dis. On 4, 27 against, 2 abstentions. The motion is lost. Okay. And that, in fact, being the last motion we were able to deal with before the closing time for the council meeting, I can declare this council meeting closed as of now. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.